Well, good morning, everyone. This is Rod Shagas, Parkland County Mayor, and I'll call the meeting to order at 9:01 for September 28th, 2021. And this is the final council meeting for this term. So the session is in place now. And with the recent declaration of a public health emergency and the implementation of a new health order, this meeting is being conducted electronically under Parkland County's meeting procedure bylaw 2015-06 and section 199 of the Municipal Government Act. So I'll start today's meeting with roll call, and I'll ask each member of council by division to confirm your presence by stating, saying yes or present. And I'll start with Councillor Jensen, Division 1.
Present.
Division 3, Councillor Capacitor.
Present.
Division 4, Councillor Hollins.
Present.
Division 5, Councillor McNabb.
Good morning and present.
Division 6 Councillor Melnick.
Good morning, present.
Thank you. So the minutes will reflect all members of council are present for this meeting, and I will ask that everybody on this call keep your microphone muted until you're asked to speak. I just want to go through the meeting procedural measures that will be followed to ensure that we do have transparency and fairness for this meeting. So with the items today, I'll read out each agenda item and ask the Chief Administrative Officer to introduce that matter. I'll then ask a member of council to put forward the motion. Then I'll open the floor up for council members to provide comment. Each member will have an opportunity to speak to the matter, and I will look to all members of the council until there's no further comments. Once comments have been concluded, I will then ask members of council whether they're for or against the motion, and then I'll declare the motion either carried or failed. So with that, at this time, I would ask Councillor McNabb to provide us inspirational reflection, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And during our council meeting today, may we have strength and encouragement in our service to others. May we rely on wisdom to guide us to make good decisions for the present and the future of our county.
Thank you, Councillor McNabb. So with that, on today's agenda, we have the following items. Item 4.1 is the adoption of the September 14th, 2021 council meeting minutes. At 9:15 under item 5.1, we have public input. Under item 5.2, we have an appointment at 9:30, and that is the TransAlta Tri-Leisure Center. Item 5.3, we have a 10 o'clock appointment, and that is the Community Sustainability Committee. At 10:30, under agenda item 5.4, we have an appointment, and that is the Agriculture Service Board. Item 6.1 is bylaw 2021-03, and that is road closure for the purpose of lease. Item B1 is Parkland County COVID-19 update. Item B2 is the project management office update. Item D1 is the 2022 Recreation and Culture Capital Cost Share request. Item D2, we have the Magnolia Community League Sustainability Grant Major Capital Request. Item D3 is the Entwistle Community Recreation Center update. Item F1 is the Microsoft Enterprise Agreement. Item G1, addressing vandalism at the Capacitor Transfer Station. Item 8.1 is the Rural Municipalities of Alberta Contact Newsletter. Item 8.2 is the Federation of Canadian Municipalities update. And item 8.3 is committee reports. I'll now ask members of council if there's any additions or deletions to today's agenda. And again, I'll start with Division 1, Councillor Jensen.
None for me, thank you.
Division 3, Councillor Capacitor.
Nothing to add, Mr. Chair.
Division 4, Councillor Hollins.
Nothing, thank you.
Division 5, Councillor McNabb.
Nothing from me, thank you.
And Division 6, Councillor Melnick.
No additions or deletions, thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Swain, are there any additions or deletions from administration today?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to add one item to the agenda today. So under item D, Agriculture, Community and Protective Services Matters. As item D4, Parkland County Agricultural Crop Update. It'll be a verbal presentation. And I wish to request that that item be presented either before or after item 5.4, which is the 10:30 a.m. Agricultural Services Board update. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Ms. Swain. So with that, we'll continue on here with just some additional items, and that'll be the consent item, or pardon me, can I get a motion to adopt the agenda as amended, please?
Mr. Mayor, it's Councillor Annalisa Jensen, Division 1, and I'll make that motion.
Thank you. And please indicate if you're in favor or opposed. Councillor Jensen.
Sorry, we were putting our hands up. In favor.
Councillor Capacitor.
In favor.
Councillor Hollins. Councillor Hollins in favor?
In favor.
Thank you. Councillor McNabb
In favor.
and Councillor Melnick.
In favor. Mayor Shagus, would we be okay just to raise our hands? Is that?
Sure, I'll do that. Absolutely.
Thanks.
I'll do that. So
Thank
that is carried. Thank you. And then with the consent agenda today, we have item 4.1, the adoption of the September 14th, 2021 council meeting minutes. Item 8.1, which is the Rural Municipalities Alberta Contact Newsletter. Item 8.2 is the Federation of Canadian Municipalities update. And I will ask members of council if there's any additions or deletions to that consent agenda. And if not, I will ask for a mover for that motion, please.
Chair, Councillor Capacitor, I move the consent agenda be adopted 4.1, 8.1, and 8.2.
Thank you. And please raise your hand if you're in favor of that motion. And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. And with that, Ms. Swain, we'll move to item 6.1, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Jody Hancock, Director of Engineering Services, is prepared to present the Road Closure Bylaw 2021-03 for the purpose of lease and answer any questions council may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Swain. I'll just check to make sure my mic is good. Okay. Mayor and Council, in front of us with this item is a request to close a portion of Road Plan 1143 MC, and this is for the purpose of leasing. This request was received by Camp Hee-Ho-Ha's development area. They are looking to close the roadway from where they've installed a temporary gate to a termination point of the roadway as shown on the attached images. That's in the package of information there, and it's probably the best image would be the attachment number 3. Camp Hee-Ho-Ha is, which is in a disposition with Alberta Environment and Parks, is at the north end of this portion of Range Road 55. They've informed the county that they've been experiencing increased cases of trespassing, vandalism, theft, and illegal dumping. The closure for the purposes of lease will allow the camp to install the gate and close the roadway to public access, limiting the activity accessing the site, limiting the activity to those that should be there accessing the site, facility, and program. The attached lease includes a condition that Camp Hee-Ho-Ha build a turnaround prior to a point where the public reaches the closed portion of the roadway and away from local residents' driveways. If you recall, when we brought this forward for first reading, there was a little bit of concern from the area residents with turnarounds in front of them. We've moved that turnaround a few hundred meters further down the roadway, and I'll point to a design plan that we've produced, as well as the lease that talks to the requirement for this turnaround. The Municipal Government Act requires road closures to be advertised, hold approval from the Minister of Transportation. This was advertised, and we did conduct a public hearing on March 9th, 2021. We reconvened on April 27th. At that time, council did vote in favor for the closure to proceed to minister sign-off and second and third reading, which is where we are today. The applicant is a not-for-profit organization. The annual lease fee is $1 as per the 2021 fees and charges schedule. So I'm not sure if we can share screens, but I will point to attachment number 5, and I'll give a brief second for those to navigate there if you'd like. So attachment 5 is the proposed lease. At our last discussion, there was a request to see the lease, to see what that format looks like. And I'll just run through some of the bullets, not all of them. Bullet number 1 identifies that the lease and identifies the agreement terminating in December 31st, 2024. And we can extend that at the point in time. We can continue to renew the lease for 3 and 5 year terms, depending on what the right decision is at that point in time. And it also has the lease rate of $1. Bullet number 8 discusses where the county authorizes the leasee to fence and gate the lands. So that's allowing Camp Hee-Ho-Ha to put the gate across the roadway for the portion that's closed. And it clearly indicates that the construction is at their sole cost. And then that refers to the traffic turnaround design, which I'll point to in a second. Further down in that same clause, the leasee ensure ample reflective safety markers are placed on the gate. So again, that was a concern that was brought forward by area residents, that the gate was there without proper reflective materials on the gate. So we'll make sure that that gate is clearly visible in low light conditions. Going further down to article number 17 in this lease agreement, that the county shall be at liberty to terminate this agreement at any time on 30 days notice. So there was a question of if things change, if the situation is different, if the county wants to stop this road closure in this lease agreement, what controls do we have? This gives us 30 days written notice, and we can remove the gate and open the road back up if there is a reason to do so. This lease will be signed or will be required to be signed prior to the road closure fully being in effect and that gate being installed. If I can refer to attachment number 4. So that is a design that we've provided to the Camp Hee-Ho-Ha folks to show them what could be done in the area. So again, what we were talking about was a hammerhead style turnaround. It's not a bulb, it's just you pull in and then you back out and turn and go back your other direction. So there'll be bullards at one end to make sure that you can't drive into the site. It's not going to function as an access. The bullards are there to stop pulling straight in. And this will be constructed by Camp Hee-Ho-Ha, or will be required to be constructed by Camp Hee-Ho-Ha prior to the gate going up, prior to the road being closed. This is an example that we've put together. We will work with them to build what they're able to build. We'll be out there assisting and helping them as best we can. With that, I'll return back to the report itself, and the motions are there in front of council to review. I'll turn it back to council if there's any questions. If I've left anything out, by all means, happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hancock. And before we move to the 3 motions and any questions council may have, I'll move to item 5.1 on today's agenda, and that is public input. And we do have 3 residents who have indicated the desire to speak to council this morning. And so I will call on those residents in the order that their request was received. And so the first resident is Ms. Susan Penstone. If we can have Ms. Penstone. I see she is present. So the floor is yours if you want to unmute yourself, Ms. Penstone. Thank you.
Good morning. This is Susan Penstone. I'm hoping you can hear me.
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Before I go ahead, I'm sorry, Mayor. I'm expecting one other speaker. There's 3 of us in our community who will be speaking to this issue. And I see that one is listed on my screen, but the other is in hold, listening to music. Is there a way to link her in? Sorry for this. It's all new technology to us.
Yes, not a problem. So go ahead with your presentation. I'm sure our administration will bring her into the meeting room here. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Oh, she says she's in, so we're good. Okay, well, good morning, Mayor and councillors and county staff. I'm Susan Penstone, and I'm the first of 3 speakers speaking on behalf of the community of Amos Acres on the issue of addressing vandalism at the Capacitor transfer station. For several years, residents living in the Amos Acres community and along Range Road 35 north of Highway 16 have experienced an increase in negative and illegal activities, resulting in a huge level of trespassing and break-and-enters. Our community observes these activities appear to be in correlation with the transfer station. We noted that illegal activities regularly occur at or near the transfer station during non-operational times, at night after sunset, and especially after 11 p.m. through to sunrise, 7 days a week, and especially on the evenings immediately after operational hours, which are Thursday night to Monday night. Illegal activities appear to include removing items from the transfer station, providing a meeting place for several people to congregate, sleep, and conduct activities that look like trafficking, drug, or stolen goods. These activities create a high level of anxiety in the community. Our members feel unsafe when driving from the highway to their homes, especially at night. They feel unsafe in their own homes during the day and especially at night. In past years, we've met with County Bylaw Protective Services and the RCMP about our concerns. And this year has been the first time we reached out to Public Works through a letter to our Councillor John McNabb. Subsequently, the Director of Public Works contacted our community committee. Together, we collaborated to find solutions to this concern as well as the overall site security and the multiple trails leading into the transfer station, the connection between the drug house on Range Road 35 and illegal activities at the facility and across the facility entrance, and the litter along Range Road 35 and west and north of the facility's entrance. After several meetings with Public Works, we jointly arrived at a consensus that the likely source for most of the illegal activities at the transfer station is the storage of electronics and metals. Metals and electronics are a valued commodity within drug trafficking operations. Recycled for cash, the money is used to support their activities. We theorize that if the incentives were removed, we should see a decline in the illegal activities at the facility and contain a spillover effect into our community. That's the end of my presentation, Mayor. I'd now like to introduce my neighbor, Tim Letwin, to present the next segment of our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Penstone. Go ahead, Mr. Letwin.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Yeah, good morning, Mayor and Council. My name is Tim Letwin. I'm a resident of Amisk Acres. In our discussions with Public Works, we learned that management of metals changed over the years of operations. At one time, facility patrons threw their metals into a big pile, and every once in a while it was removed. Then management practices changed. Metals were collected in a bin, and when full, it was hauled away. We learned that the bin collection and no on-site metal storage incidents reduced vandalism. Management practices have since changed. Today, the practice of collecting in bins is still used, but filled bins are dumped into a holding pile at the facility. The metal pile is removed at a later time. With the change, vandalism increased, though not the only reason why scavenging increased. The metal pile once again became an incentive. Speaking to Public Works recommendations to change policy and not accept electronics and metals at the facility is a step in the right direction. It does take away the incentive. However, our community strongly encourages the facility to continue to accept these items, but remove these materials weekly. Our concern is that to refuse these items altogether would create more problems in our community. Some community members feel thieves would turn their attention to our community to satisfy their need for alternative income. We're also concerned about facility patrons dumping their garbage in our community. In addition to the electronics and metal storage, our discussions with Public Works looked at the trails leading into the facility. We asked that large barricades be installed on these trails and to prevent access to the trail across the facility. The barricades would act as a deterrent to bicycle and vehicle traffic. In addition to keeping these areas free of litter, timely repair of damaged fencing is a signal to trespassers that we all care about the facility. We appreciate facility personnel has begun to check the facility perimeter and the range road to the highway for garbage after the close of its operations. Since our discussions with Public Works, litter is greatly reduced and staff has been responsive to our requests for cleanup. Around the facility, the few times areas were missed, we know it's an added draw on resources to repair fences, collect litter, and put up barricades. But all these actions are indicators that our neighborhood is a respectful one, and that we look out for each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Letwin. And then the third registrant for today is Ms. Lorraine Roberts Griffith. So if you're able to unmute yourself, the floor is yours.
Mayor, if you just give me 1 second, I will text her. She says she's in, but for some reason, something's not happening. So may I just double check with her?
Yes, absolutely.
Just checking, is she called in on her telephone, or is she on her
That's
computer?
correct.
Okay,
She's on
so
the phone.
she'll have to press star someone
Star,
her
star 6 should
star
work.
6. So I'll just ask for her to press star 6 and we should be able to hear her then.
Okay, I just text her that. We'll see what happens. She says she's trying, but it's not coming in.
I'll just ask our meeting administrators if they have the ability to unmute her themselves.
Thank you, Ms. Swain. It's Barb Williams. No, I'm sorry, we do not, because she's on the phone. So she does need to press star 6.
Sorry, I'm a slow texter. She says she's pressing it, it's not working. I've just asked if I could present on her behalf. Sorry, this has been a big community effort and I'd hate to bulldoze my way in. Thank you for your patience. Okay, so she's said, okay, I can speak. Is that all right then, Mayor?
Yes, please, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. So the Public Works recommendation does not address the other core reason for the illicit activities at the facility and in our community. And that's the relationship between the transfer station and the drug house on Range Road 35. We're hopeful that removing the electronics and metals will encourage the drug house occupants and its customers to shop elsewhere. However, it's unknown whether the removal of electronics and metals will curtail the illegal business transactions and other illicit activities that take place at and across from the facility's entrance. Discussion on the specific issue is for another time, and we understand that Public Works couldn't really mention, say anything directly to this in their own report because that's not part of their mandate. However, we feel it's really important that council be made aware that there is a link between the facility and drug house activities, and that whatever your decision, this link must not be lost in the implementation and evaluation of your decision. Whatever your decision today on the issues around the vandalism at the Capacitor and transfer station, we encourage the continuation of the collaborative process that we began with Public Works. We encourage an evaluation process be implemented so that we can all learn whether your decision produces the desired outcome. We hope to be part of creating a process that measures its impacts in our community, specifically the off-hour activities described earlier, the trespassing and theft on our own properties, the security and litter. Evaluation should be conducted throughout the year and have the flexibility to adapt and make changes to practices throughout the year rather than waiting until the end of the evaluation process. So in closing, Mr. Mayor, the issue and the solutions brought forward today is more than making a decision based on dollars and cents. It's about how actions and business activities of one neighborhood, of one neighbor, affects its neighbors, and how collectively business and neighbors can collaborate and test solutions that would better serve the whole. Thank you very much for listening to us this morning.
Well, thank you for coming forward today. This morning, I want to thank you, Ms. Penstone, as well as Mr. Letwin. And regrettably, we couldn't get Ms. Griffiths connected, but really do appreciate her willingness to come forward. And so council, as you know, does have this on our agenda later on, and that decision will be made. But do appreciate the comments, and I trust that this will be on the radar for the new council and administration moving forward. And I trust that there will be ongoing dialogue with the community there in Amescaker. So thank you again for coming forward this morning.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So with that, we do have a scheduled presentation at 9:30, and that is the Tri-Leisure Center. And I'm looking on the screen to see if we do have the presenters. And maybe if I can get some confirmation from administration.
I believe we do.
Okay, so if we could, Ms. Swain, I'll turn that over to you for the introduction on 5.2. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Please welcome Letty Richer, Tri-Leisure Center General Manager. He is here to present their 2022 budget and 2020 annual report and answer any questions that council may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Swain. Good morning, Your Worship, members of council. Here, pleased this morning to join you to present the 2022 budget for council's consideration and questions. I'm going to be joined this morning by Mr. Jerry George, who is vice chair of our board. He's just kind of wrapping up another commitment with work and will be joining us shortly. 2022 budget was certainly a challenging one to develop, with a lot of unknowns still in terms of the after effects and ongoing effects of COVID-19. Administration took a conservative approach to revenue generation internally, and as such, reduced expenses accordingly as much as possible. I'm going to share my screen. My apologies for not having done that. So this morning, I'm going to cover a few items as we move forward in the budget presentation. We'll review the TLC's peak priorities, highlight the 2022 key objectives, then I'll delve into the budget around revenues and expenses, speak briefly on cost recovery, talk to our capital and infrastructure requests, and then specifically deal with the municipal contribution request for 2022. So our peak priorities, the board of directors has a 10-year strategic plan that identifies 4 peak priorities that really drive the work that we do. Personnel, engaging stakeholders, asset management, and key service levels are those 4 key peak priorities. In looking at our 2022 key objectives, due to the significant impacts of COVID-19 on both 2020 and 2021 operational years, have led to some key objectives being deferred into 2022. Additionally, administration has identified a number of new priority initiatives heading into the new year. Certificate of Recognition, or CORE, has been deferred due to significant closures, staff being away from the facility, or not being in regular operational mode. We intend to complete this in the first quarter of 2022, again, barring any ongoing restrictions that may be in place due to COVID-19. Additionally, we'll also continue to provide opportunities for staff input as a follow-up to the Great Place to Work survey that we had completed for 3 years in a row, which really gauges staff satisfaction at work, things that we can do to improve their work experience, to develop teams within our large organization. Additional priority as it pertains to staff training and customer experience will be the development of an internal customer experience training program with the goal of having baseline service level expectations when it comes to customer interaction and experience in the facility. We feel that we do a great job within our departments individually, dealing with the needs of our patrons and our program participants, but feel that there is an opportunity to have a consistent baseline training across the board in terms of our staff. And so we're looking to develop that in-house over the course of 2022. And the final area in customer experience and stakeholder engagement, now that we've our long-awaited Intelli-Leisure upgrade, which is our membership program registration and facility booking software, is going to allow us to expand and enhance our online options. This includes membership and program registration and payment, access to more detailed facility information, among other benefits. So we're certainly looking forward to that. The building enhancement category that's on the right-hand side of the slide, I'll get into greater detail a little bit later in our capital and infrastructure ask, but the 4 main items are replacement of our evaporative condenser, fitness equipment life cycle replacement, a locker retrofit phase 1 that I'll speak to a little bit later, as well as a pool anti-entrapment modification that we have to go through. Looking at our revenue as a whole, we're looking at a revenue in 2022 of just over 5.2 million, and that's in specific internal generated revenues. Our operating expenses, less depreciation of about 7.2 million, which leaves our operating cost recovery rate at 72.37%. Detailed breakdown a little bit in terms of the revenue generation. We see that memberships, passes, and admissions is about 2.3 million. Programs and services stays relatively flat compared to 2021. Facility rentals takes a bit of a dip, and that's more so to our special event rentals that we're not sure are going to be able to continue in 22, such as surface mine rescue, some big tournaments that, depending on where the COVID restrictions may still be at that time, may not happen. So we budgeted accordingly that those revenues may not be there. And then our administrative revenues are things like tenant rent, corporate sponsorship, those types of ideas or those types of items. Total 5.2 million, which compared to 2021 is about a $300,000 decrease. Comparing 2022 to a typical year, which our last typical year would have been 2019, it's about $1 million less in revenue that we're anticipating for 2022. Looking at the 5-year trend and speaking to that point, so normally we're in that 6.3 to 6.4 million range. Of course, 2020 was resulted in our facility being closed for more than half the year. And this year's budget, we know that we're not going to attain, due to ongoing closures, the 5.5 million that it was initially budgeted for. So we're reducing expenses accordingly. So you just see that trend over the 5-year period of time. Turning to our expenses. In terms of expenses, we did ask departments to reduce their budget as much as possible without impacting service levels substantially. The board has felt and is committed to trying to maintain the service levels that the region has come to expect from the TLC. And so we've adjusted our budgets without those impacts. Looking at the salaries and benefits line, it has gone up slightly, but you'll also see a fairly significant decrease in materials, goods, and supplies. Part of that reason in salaries and budget is we've got a staff member, a supervisor who is retiring next year, who to this point has been on contract. So that was captured in the materials, goods, and supplies line. And the replacement would then become a permanent FTE as opposed to a contract. So that's why the majority of the reason for the increase in the salaries and benefits. In terms of utilities, we're proposing that we keep that stagnant over 2021. We did recently complete a major lighting retrofit, converting all of our existing lights to, or remaining lights to LED. However, there's a number of other factors there that we're seeing in terms of increased charges in our utility rates. And so we want to make sure that we aren't under budgeting in that category. However, we are hopeful that we will come in under that expense. So total expenses, 7.6 million compared to 7.8 million compared to 2021. Again, the 5-year average, they're looking at, as you can see, it's about just under $1 million difference between what a quote unquote typical year might have been in 2019 compared to what we're anticipating in 2022. In terms of cost recovery, in order to maintain our current service levels, which I spoke to before, there is a slight increase in the gap between internally generated revenues and expenses, which of course is the cost recovery rate. This has resulted in a requested increase in the municipal operating contribution of approximately $100,000, which is about 5.3%, which I'll speak to in a little bit. It is anticipated that over the course of 2022, especially in the latter half, we're hoping we would see a return to more typical revenue generation for the TLC, which would result in a decreased operating request in 2023, which would see, again, on the flip side of that, would see an increase in the cost recovery rate. Speaking to the capital funding request for 2022, the 2022 proposed capital budget includes two major categories. One is a replacement of our ride-on mower, which is well beyond its life expectancy. We have tried to limp along with it over the past couple of years, and it's definitely time to be replaced in order for us to maintain our turf outside of our facility, as well as our annual replacement of fitness equipment. We were able to pare that request down fairly substantially compared to a typical year, because of course we were closed for approximately half the year last year, so the wear and tear on those pieces of equipment wasn't what it typically would be. However, there still are some pieces that do need to be replaced. In order to reduce the municipal contribution request, administration recommended to the board, who approved and asked us to bring forward to council for consideration, that the capital budget be funded by carry forward funds from previous capital and infrastructure projects that either came in under budget or the scope was reduced. Currently, there's approximately $143,000 in unallocated carry forward funds. And should councils approve this funding approach, there would still be approximately $50,000 to cover any unanticipated expenses to current or future capital or infrastructure items. 2022's infrastructure budget is shows a significant need to invest in the infrastructure, Next year, we'll be celebrating our 20-year anniversary of being operational in the tri-municipal region. And with that, of course, comes aging facility and the requirement to replace some pretty significant items along the way. The 2022 infrastructure budget is proposed at just under $730,000 and includes the items you see there listed. So the evaporative condenser and cooling tower in the arena, 1 or 2 of our air handling units, an heat exchanger, refrigerant compressors, and pumps. Again, as those start to age out, we need to replace those. I'll speak a little bit to the locker retrofit phase 1. What we're proposing to do is start to replace our lockers, which currently have coin locking mechanisms and bring your own lock opportunities, with a much more rigid locking mechanism that is combination based, and it would be at no cost to the user. And we feel that even though we will lose a small amount of revenue from that, we feel that that's going to provide a much safer experience for our patrons, in that the lockers are going to be that much more difficult to break into, hoping to reduce our locker theft issues, which pop up from time to time. We've seen other municipalities move this way, most notably the city of Edmonton, who have shown significant reduction in the amount of locker incidents, which of course take up a lot of staff time in terms of investigation, as well as our CMP call-ups and that sort of thing. We're proposing to replace a portion of our lockers in phase 1, do a bit of an evaluation to see if we're seeing the same results and what how that rolls out, and then look to potentially move forward with phase 2 and possibly phase 3 in the future. Preschool program space upgrade. Currently, we have a very successful preschool program, which operates out of what was initially designed as a meeting room. And they've done a fantastic job over the years to accommodate and kind of maneuver around the limitations that a meeting room would have versus a program space. And so now that we've had such a successful program and it's expanding, prior to COVID, it was growing quite rapidly. We are looking to upgrade that space. We now have a meeting room inside Shots Lounge, which can be used for what that space previous was used for. And so we're looking to really truly dedicate that space to our preschool program and provide a small amount of upgrades to be able to facilitate that. And the final item on the list is a pool anti-entrapment retrofit. A couple of years ago, Alberta Health came out with some new requirements around pool anti-entrapment, and our facility, just like many aged facilities, don't meet the new requirements. And so we're working with Alberta Health Services to come up with a retrofit plan that will meet all the new requirements, as we're beyond now the ability to be grandfathered in. And so we don't have the exact details on that, as we're still working through that. However, we have put some money in the budget that we feel should be an appropriate amount to carry out that work. As with the capital request, we are proposing a different approach to funding the infrastructure request this year, and we're proposing a 50-50 split, 50% being asked of the 3 municipalities, with the other 50% coming from our restricted reserve. Our current reserve has a balance of approximately $657,000 of unallocated funds. The lighting retrofit that I mentioned before had $250,000 allocated to it, which is in addition to the $650,000. However, that project has come in under budget, and so we'll be returning a portion of those funds back to the restricted reserve. So in total, if this funding request was approved at the $365,000 approximately coming out of those reserves, we would have approximately $435,000 remaining for future years projects as required. Additionally, the administration will be applying for a community initiatives program grant, which could cover up to $125,000 worth of these costs. So in looking at the total ask of municipalities from the 3 categories, operating, capital, and infrastructure, we are looking at an increased operating request of about $100,000, as mentioned previously. The capital infrastructure, we'd be asking for 0 requests should the funding strategy be approved. And the infrastructure, again, at 50% would be just under $365,000 for a total ask of $2.36 million, which is up about $200,000 over this current year. However, due to in large part from the infrastructure request that's required. So just in summary, looking at revenues compared to last year, revenues we're anticipating a decrease again of about 5.4%. We've managed to decrease our expenses by 2.5% to try to balance that out. We are asking for an increased contribution on the operating side of things from municipalities of about 5.3%. And of course, we're going to continue to monitor the residual impacts. We were just starting to see some really good progress in August, September, and now with the recent changes again, we'll have to monitor where that's going in terms of our revenue generation and program participation. So heading into 2022, we felt we were being conservative in terms of our budgeting and hoping that as 2023 comes around the corner quicker than maybe we'd like to anticipate, that we would see a return to a more typical annual self-generated revenue level. With that, I would be happy to answer any questions that council may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Richer. And I'll start by taking a motion from a member of council with this item, please, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Hollins, I move that the TransAlta Tri-Leisure Center 2022 budget presentation and the 2020 annual report be received as information as presented. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'll open it for comments or questions from members of council. And if you can just raise your hand if you do have a question. Councillor Capacitor.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Richer, for talking about your immediate or planned major expenditure items, replacement items that you're going to look at in the next budget, the 2022 budget. Can you just give an idea of pulling from reserves? You're recommending pulling from reserves and to help cover the immediate infrastructure costs that you're looking at. In terms of a long-term plan, what other major costs, replacement costs, are you predicting into the next, say, 3 years, as an example?
Your worship, through to Councillor Krabashik and the rest of the council. As the facility is aging at that 20-year mark, there are going to be a significant number of major replacement items required. Of course, we know that 2026 is a large year. That 25-year mark is probably going to be the largest item, but we're probably seeing similar level of requests over the coming years. And that's why we propose to use 50% of it coming from the reserves this year to lessen the impact on the municipality to try to bridge that process. Having said that, we do annually review our long-term capital plan to make sure that we're on the right track and that those items are actually do need to be replaced, and where they can be pushed out further, we do take that opportunity to extend. But I would foresee over the next 3 years a similar level of that $700,000 to $1 million requirement to maintain the facility at the level it's at currently.
Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Lenny, for your presentation and for the work that you do. Can you tell me what your guys' anticipated shortfall is going to be this year, or excess? Where are you anticipating that you're going to be this year? I might have missed that.
Your worship, through you to Councillor Melnick and rest of council. When we came for our mid-year update not too long ago, we were anticipating in about the $160,000 deficit range, not knowing what the year end was going to look like, because of course with our operating reserve, that does fluctuate based on the number of factors, and so we can't accurately depict that, but we were anticipating about $160,000. And then the changes were announced about a week and a half ago, and so we're still trying to see where the uptake is going to be, because of course we did move to implementing the restrictions exemption program as of yesterday, and so we are going to be monitoring that over the coming week and see where that we have seen some return of some individuals that maybe have stayed away, but of course we've also seen some folks withdrawing, and so we're hoping that that'll be a net balance, but we are going to track that. So right now, as of the last update, it was about $160,000. We'll probably have a better idea by the end of October if that's going to be increasing significantly or decreasing, because part of the need through the REP was some additional resources for the screening at the front door, because we didn't have staff capacity internally to do that, and so that was an extra expense. So certainly we'll be continuing to update through the general managers as the course of the year continues to roll out.
And if I may have a follow-up, Mr. Mayor, is so with the additional measures that you're having to put in, is there grant funding that you're able to apply for, or you have applied for, to offset some of those costs, or not?
Your worship, through Councillor Malik and the rest of council. At this point, we haven't identified any new funding opportunities. A significant number of the grants that were available previously, we did apply for the ones that we were eligible for, but we were ineligible for a significant number because of the connection to municipalities. So we will continue to monitor and hope that there may be some relief funding coming out to those that have implemented REP, and certainly will apply for every opportunity for grant opportunity that exists.
Thank you. There's nothing further.
I'm looking to other members of council if there's any questions. Mr. Richer, just have a question on utilities on your presentation and in the documents. It shows those expenses constant from last year to budget for 2020, just under $1 million. I know my electricity rates have gone up. Natural gas prices are going up. Looking at the Alberta Energy Regulator site and the ASO site, they're forecasting increases in both electricity and natural gas, fairly significant potentially. So just a little bit, I guess just some clarification and the justification for keeping those at a constant rate. I do realize there are different providers. I'm not sure if we're locked into a contract. If you can elaborate, please. Thank you.
Your worship, through you to yourself and the rest of the council, that's an excellent question. We kept it stagnant, I guess, as I mentioned. We did go through a significant lighting upgrade. So every light in our facility now is LED. So we know there's going to be some cost savings there, as well as we just replaced our chiller in our arena, which again would provide some operational efficiencies from an energy perspective. The condenser for next year, when we replace that, that also will reduce some on the water side of utilities, a need for the water. So we're hopeful that those will offset each other. Obviously, we'll continue to monitor that. And if we see those creeping up, then we'll do our best to offset expenses in other categories to combat that.
Great, thank you for that. One last time, any further comments from members of council? I'm not seeing any, so we do have the motion that was put forward by Councillor Hollins. Please raise your hand if you're in favor of that motion. And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. Mr. Richer, you did indicate that you were expecting the vice chair. I am not seeing him having joined.
You're correct. I don't see that he was able to jump on. So okay. I think work commitments may have extended beyond his capacity to join us.
Okay. Thank you. So thank you for the presentation and your continued work at the TLC. Thank you, Mr. Richer.
Thank you for your time.
So we'll go back to item 6.1 that was under business arising. That was a road closure, and there was 3 motions attached to that. If I can get a mover for the first motion with that item, please.
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah,
Mr. Mayor.
I can put forward the first motion, Councillor Melnick, if you want, or Councillor, blah, blah, blah. I'll let you go, Mr. McNabb. I guess you didn't see. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Melnick, proposed motion is that bylaw 2021-03 receive second reading.
Thank you, and I'll open it up for comments or questions. Councillor Melnick.
Thank you. You know, it just hit me now, and I just wonder, and it's something that possibly I should have asked on many of the other lease opportunities that we do when we lease out a road. Is there any liability that's left to Parkland County, or do we ask for indemnification on insurances, especially with there being a gate? I know there's the talk of putting the reflective on there. Is there anything within that we asked to be protected?
Through the mayor to Councillor Melnick, I don't think we have an indemnification clause within the lease, but we do treat it almost like it's a parcel that we're leasing out. So we give them the ownership of that. I suppose there's always a chance that if something should occur, that all folks would be labeled in a discussion, but we do have clauses within that lease that speak to the ownership and operation and control and maintenance of that facility or that location. So we do. It's almost like a transfer of ownership to them during the lease period.
I just wonder if in future, if possibly that that's just looked into, whether or not, I know they can sue anybody and everybody, but whether or not from our insurance perspective, if they feel that it would be best and in our interests to be adding those to future contracts. I'm not going to stop it on this one, but I'm just, in future contracts, possibly at renewal times, or as we have new contracts that come up. Thanks.
Appreciate that. We can certainly take that away.
And I'll look to Mr. McGowan. I see he's got his hand raised and possibly has some supplementary information on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just would like to point out that in the attachment, I believe it is number 5, there is an indemnification clause. It's quite comprehensive. It's under item or section 15 within the bylaw. So it is a very comprehensive indemnification clause, and council can read that. And it saves the county harmless with regards to liability, suits, claims, fines, demands, among many other items within that fairly comprehensive clause. I just wanted to point that out, that I believe it is completely covered at this point in time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Capacitor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To Mr. Hancock, in the lease, this clause number 1, I believe it was, you talked about the term of the lease, and you indicated that it can be a 3-year or 5-year. With a 30-day cancellation opportunity, if Parkland required it, being available, is there any reason we couldn't extend this for administrative purposes, just to go to the 5-year lease, so that it's not having to come up every 3 years on, and let it go to a 5-year period, so that it's not as, I guess, cumbersome?
Through to Councillor Capacitor, I may have misquoted myself there. This lease is to December 31st, 2024, which is a 3-year term. That's the standard distance or length that we provide for leases for roadways. And we have them in a bit of a cycle to reduce the administrative responsibilities and requirements so that we can manage our workload appropriately, that we're not extending too far out, that we're not checking in on them, but we're also not having to renew these every year. I believe they used to be renewed every single year, and it just tripled the amount of work that we needed to do.
Okay, with that, I just, in your comments, you did indicate that it could be 3 years or 5 years. So if it's in a cycle and 3 years is more convenient, I was just looking at something that, causes, we do have an opportunity for the cancellation. So if it could be extended to 5, and that would give more, opportunity for administration to deal with other matters, I thought that would be workable. But if it's in a cycle and your explanation is fine, then I understand what you're saying. I accept that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions? First reading here. I am not seeing any, so I'll ask members of council, please raise your hand if you're in favor of the motion. And that is carried unanimously. If I can get a mover for that second motion. Councillor Melnick.
Thank you. I'll put forward the motion that bylaw 2021-03 receive third and final reading.
Thank you. And any questions or comments from members of council on that third reading? Not seeing any, please raise your hand if you're in favor. That is carried unanimously. Thank you. And I need a mover for the third and final motion on this item.
Mr. Mayor, Councillor Jensen, Division 1, I'll make the motion that council approve authorization of electronic signature for bylaw 2021-03 in accordance with section 213 of the Municipal Government Act.
Thank you. Comments, questions? Please indicate if you're in favor. Raise your hand. That is carried unanimously. Thank you. Ms. Swain, we do have 4 minutes. I'm not sure how long that item B1 is, which is the Parkland County COVID-19 update.
I can do the item B1 quite quickly if you want me to go through that, and then we can move to the 10 a.m.
Please then, go ahead.
Okay. So thank you. As you're aware, Alberta declared a state of emergency, a public health emergency. So new ministerial orders, orders in council, and legislation have been implemented as a result. New public health restrictions came into effect starting on September 16th to reduce spread and protect our public health care system. These public health actions are targeting the province's top 3 priorities with the pandemic, which are maximizing healthcare capacity, getting as many Albertans vaccinated as possible, and reducing transmission through contact. Parkland County is continually monitoring the situation with our provincial counterparts, and we have rigorous safeguards in place to assist our employees and the public in maintaining the level of protection as required by the province. As per these new restrictions, we have asked that staff who are not required to be in the office or in the field to perform their work duties from home. The Parkland County Centre does remain open to the public for walk-in services. The Entwistle Community Recreation Centre is open for some in-person services, and masks must be worn at all times in indoor public spaces under the Government of Alberta's restrictions. Appointments are requested for requests that require more time, such as subdivisions or industrial and commercial development and building permits. Our animal shelter is also open for intake by appointment. We acknowledge that there are many different perspectives, and we ask our community to be kind, compassionate, and respectful, especially when it comes to dealing with Parkland staff who are requesting compliance with these measures. Parkland County does operate one recreation facility, which is the Entwistle Outdoor Pool, but this has now closed for the season. All other county facilities are not regulated by the Provincial Restriction Exemption Program. The Tri-Leisure Centre, which is independently operated, started the Restriction Exemption Program yesterday. We do ask that residents and visitors continue to monitor our website for COVID updates. I'd also like to once again thank staff for their adaptability throughout this pandemic, especially our staff who have continued to work in the field or in the office as they've had to adhere to continually changing protocols. I'd also like to thank our COVID response team, Brian Cornforth, Carol Woolsey, Tom Watts, Rebecca Lewicki, and Tony Savage. And lastly, I'd like to thank Council for your support with administration in implementing these measures. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Swain, for that update. And if I can get a mover for the motion for this item, Councillor Capacitor.
Chair, Councillor Capacitor, Division 4, I move that the Parkland County COVID-19 update be received as information as presented.
Thank you. Any comments from members of council? So on behalf of council, I want to thank administration for all the time and effort that's been expended on this. It's been a difficult 18, 19 months. It looks like we're still going to be dealing with the pandemic as we move forward. And I know it's been very demanding and stressful for some of our staff. So I do appreciate the work that they put in, and hopefully we'll see some sort of normalcy in the near future. So with that, please raise your hand if you're in favor of the motion. That is carried unanimously. Ms. Swain will now move to item 5.3, which is the 10 o'clock appointment, and I'll turn it over to you for introduction, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Please welcome our staff members, Suzanne Merrills, Supervisor, Recreation and Culture, Carrie Lynn Bjarnason, Community Development Coordinator, along with Community Sustainability Committee Chair, Christine Bobby, and Committee Member, Evelyn Nichols. They are here to present the 2022 not-for-profit grant funding allocation and answer any questions council may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lynn. To Mayor and Council to present our 2022.
We're having Suzanne, if that's you, we're having some trouble. I'm not sure who's talking now, but we're having quite a bit of trouble hearing you.
Is that any better?
That is much
great.
better. Thank you.
Is that any better?
It is, yes, go ahead, please.
Okay. So I thank you and apologize for the technology issues there. So we are here today to present to you the 2022 not-for-profit grant program. So just a quick overview of what our program is. Our not-for-profit grant provides the funding to our not-for-profit organizations that support Parkland County residents through the delivery and recreation, culture, social services, and community activities. To be eligible for our grant program, you do have to be a registered society for over 1 year, be an organization that has open membership, provide programs and services that improve the quality of life for Parkland County residents. Ineligible groups include our community leagues and play schools, as they already receive grant fundings from other sources within Parkland County, and organizations that already receive other government support for operational funding, such as our ag societies. Our not-for-profit fund does provide 3 different sections for qualification for funding. So we have our operating, which is our Schedule A, and that provides our financial assistance for costs associated with the operation of the facility organization. We have our minor sustainability, which is financial assistance for costs associated with our fire safety, prevention, renovation equipment. And then we have our project-based stream, which is financial assistance for costs associated with special events, activities, and any development of new projects or programs, as in addition to volunteer training. Financial amounts, we do have a cap for each of our different funding streams. So for our Schedule A, it's a $10,000 max, which only $3,500 of that $10,000 can be facility operating expenses. Our Schedule B is a $5,000 maximum, and our Schedule C is also a $5,000 maximum. Our total maximum for the entire grant program for any one organization is $10,000 annually. So it can be a combination of the 3 schedules or just one of the 3 or 2 of the 3, whichever combination equals $10,000 annually. Historically, we have funded, in 2021, we funded just over $66,000 to our 13 NFPs. And then in 2020, we also funded approximately the same amount to about 16 NFPs. We do go through a scoring process when we are reviewing the application forms so that it is a non-biased application of our funding recommendations. We do a technical review, a principal review, we factor in the percentage of total participants who are Parkland County residents into that calculation, how they're used, and so the percentage depend based on what the use of the funds are requested for, their budget, organizational capacity to use the money responsibly, and the alignment with our strategic pillars. Historically, we've seen organizations that don't score well because they have a low number of Parkland County residents, or they did not demonstrate an alignment with their strategic pillars or any of the plans that have been approved by council for operational priorities, as well as organizational health. Some applications are rejected because their financials do not match grant requests. They have incomplete applications, and they're not eligible due to our policy. For many of these pieces, our staff do work with the groups to try and rectify any errors and any incomplete forms. But if we don't receive that information, then we can't go ahead and account for that application in the process. In 2022, we received 20 applications for a total value of $123,170.41. 17 applications met the eligibility requirement, and we are recommending that we fund it at $76,542.64. The Community Sustainability Committee did review the applications. We went through each application thoroughly, and the committee did recommend that we stick with our partial scoring matrix and maintain the funding request based on that scoring matrix. In 2022, we did see a decrease in applications. Many of those reasons we did check in with some of our regular applications due to COVID-19 meant some organizations did not operate, or they received enough funding sources from other locations due to the grants, various COVID grants, and didn't feel the need to apply for grants from Parkland County this year. Some organizations also did go dormant or did not reactivate once restrictions were lifted. Some are also short on volunteers, so they have nobody writing grants or able to write grants. Some have volunteer burnout because of all the the changes that have had to be made due to COVID, that they just don't have it in them to have the capacity to write grants at this time. And others just plainly forgot about the grant because, again, they're not active. They're not really thinking about the grant cycle and being a part of those grants, and may have missed or ignored emails that have gone out and advertising that went out. We did advertise the grants. Application forms were sent out to all previous applicants, as well as it was promoted through ads in the newspaper and on social media. Staff did provide support to our grant applications through the assistance in completing those grants, following up with any missing and incomplete application forms. And I will pass it over to our Community Sustainability Committee reps that are on the line to talk about our 2023 recommendations.
Hello, and thanks for having us here today. So I'm the chair of the Community Sustainability Board here at Parkland County, and I'd like to present our 2023 recommendations. So based on our discussion, these are the recommendations we'd like to present to Council. The first one would be connecting the scoring criteria to Council's pillars or strategic plan. So just showing a little bit more connectivity there and ensuring that the scoring criteria reflects Council's priorities. Our second one would be just rearranging the scoring criteria so that it's based on type. So separating out the service-based request from the recreation request. And what that would allow us to do would be to rank the programs based on their separate types rather than comparing them all together at once. So it would focus our process a little bit and simplify a little bit for us as well. The third item would be the addition of a small grant category for small projects and programs. And then the last item would be requesting participant numbers from applicants. And I'd just like to point out that we really valued the scoring criteria this year and put a lot of emphasis on it. And we appreciate the amount of effort that went into developing that scoring criteria. It really allowed us to evaluate these programs really effectively and efficiently. Evelyn, if you have any other comments, yeah, feel free to jump in.
Yes, thank you, Christine. I think that sums it up nicely. Basically, I just wanted to emphasize the last point there, which is to request participant numbers from applicants. One of the challenges that we had in reviewing the applications this year is a lot of times the information was presented as a percentage of Parkland residents that could take advantage of whatever the grant application was for. And one of the things that we thought would be very helpful is to actually see the actual numbers of participants. So for example, instead of saying, there's 40% Parkland County residents, it would be helpful to see is that number 10 residents making up that 40%, or is it 300 residents? So just having a little bit more information about the request regarding participant numbers from applicants was the point that I wanted to emphasize, but certainly Christine, I think, has captured the discussions well.
Thank you. So now I will, that concludes our presentation. If there are any questions, we will definitely answer those questions for you.
Thank you, Ms. Merrills, and also thanks to Ms. Bobby and Ms. Nickel for joining us today and providing the presentation. And I'll entertain a mover for this motion, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that the 2022 not-for-profit organization grant funding allocation in the amount of $76,542.64 be approved for inclusion in the 2022 budget as presented.
Thank you, Councillor Hollins, and I'll open up for questions or comments. Councillor Capacitor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Myself, along with Councillor Melnick, are council representatives on the Community Sustainability Committee, and in the chair's comments, Ms. Bobby's comment, she did make a note that this is the second year that the committee is dealing with the recommendations, and the committee has become more comfortable with the policies and more comfortable in the review process that administration is making when they're recommending grant allocations back to the committee. So there is a greater comfort level, and I just want to compliment the committee. They asked some very insightful questions. Ms. Nicol made a comment about requesting participant numbers. The committee suggested that because there's a mix, they would rather compare apples and apples and oranges and oranges. If you're going to give numbers right across the board, and as well give percentages. If you're going to do that, give that across the board. So there was a request to see the actual numbers, as Ms. Nicol pointed out, so that the committee feels comfortable that the dollars, Parkland County dollars, grant dollars, are being wisely spent to reach the most number of people in the services that are being provided. So I'm impressed. Again, I know this in the past was a somewhat trying process for council, trying to go through all these and look at community groups and their impact back to the community. The Community Sustainability Committee is, I think, able to look at it more objectively. And I think they've done well, and tip of the hat for another successful year in going through this process and coming with the recommendation today. You've done a really good job. Thank you.
Councillor McNabb.
Thank you very much. I was just looking for a little bit more information in regards to that smaller grant model or a smaller grant perspective. Maybe give me some scenarios or some kind of an idea what that would mean.
For sure, through you, Mayor, to Councillor McNabb. Where that came into play is things like our smaller groups, such as the Crime Watches, who were historically asking for $300 to $500 requests. We've had some groups with the Wadman groups joining us, that some of their groups were more, they're all under the $1,000 request, and to go through the lengthy process of completing our application program for larger sums, we got the feedback from groups that they may access some more smaller amounts for the smaller type projects. They don't need the full over $1,000 to $10,000 worth of support from Parkland County.
Okay, thank you very much. So in my understanding then, it would be like a cap of $1,000 and under type idea.
Correct. We haven't worked through that process yet, but that's kind of the idea that was floated around.
Questions or comments from other members of council? Just a couple of comments, and I guess a question I have, and Ms. Nicol, thank you for your comments regarding giving consideration to quantitative data, because having a percentage does not really reflect the usage, I guess, a high volume of usage. So we could be expending money for 2 people in Parkland County, and that could be 20, 30, 40%, but it's a very small number, and that those requests could be significant in nature. But certainly there's been a number of questions asked by council over the year how some organizations receive money, and I'm pleased that we have developed a fairly robust evaluation framework to undertake this evaluation. But I was looking at one of the grant applications, and specifically the victim services, and the reason they did not receive any money was it mentioned that they were ineligible because they receive grants from higher orders of government. We heard earlier in a presentation from Mr. Richer that the TLC did not qualify for some of the grant funding because there's an opportunity for them to access municipal funds. I'm wondering if that's been discussed because for a lot of cases, the grant funding has been diminished. There's less money available in the pot. We take a look at the CFEP grant, the Community Facility Enhancement Program. That budget has been cut by roughly 50% in the last 2 years. So there's a greater demand on that. Organizations are looking to the municipalities, similar with, and I'm not sure if that's the case with victim services, but I'm just curious whether there's been a discussion about giving, another, I guess, look at that particular criteria, and whether we can give consideration to organizations like victim services. I was at an event with victim services there 35th anniversary celebration recently, and they said that the demands on that organization, particularly with the pandemic, has escalated significantly. So there is pressure and demands. I see Mr. Cross may have an answer.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. We review the policy and the program on a regular basis, and that's certainly something we can consider and perhaps have a discussion with our community sustainability committee about in looking at potentially making that type of adjustment in certain situations. So we can take that away for sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Merrills, and then I'll go to Councillor Melnick.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Just to add to that, in terms of victim services specifically, what they had applied to was operating grants, which they receive operating funding dollars from provincial resources. Had they applied for capital or a project grant, they could have been successful because that part of their operations is not funded by provincial funding.
Thank you. Councillor Melnick.
I think also too, we need to remember though that either council is going to be adding money to the pot for approval, or somebody's going to be getting less as well. So as we recognize that other organizations may have a desire to, but we kind of go back to truly where is our mandate and how do we help some of those organizations, in my mind, not saying that others aren't as important, but how do we help some of those smaller organizations that maybe probably don't have as much expertise in grant writing and not as much exposure also to who they are in order to qualify for some grants. Thanks.
Any additional questions or comments from members of council? And I see Ms. Merrills, your virtual hand is up. I'm not sure if there's any additional. Thank you. So there's no more comments. So we do have the motion on the floor. I'll ask members of council, please raise your hand if you're in favor of that motion. That is carried unanimously. Thank you. And thank you to the presenters that came in this morning as well. So with that, we do have a scheduled appointment at 10:30. And prior to that, I'll move to item D4, and that is the agriculture crop update. I'll turn that over to Ms. Swain for introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'd like to invite James Leskew, who is our program manager with Agricultural Services, to present item 5.4. Thank you.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. It's my pleasure to present a verbal summary of our crop conditions within Parkland County in this time, and I'll put it in some context provincially as well. So we do have our staff are out in the field. We contribute information to Alberta Agriculture's crop reports. We complete crop reports every 2 weeks. So as part of this right now, we're looking at that our harvest is standing at 85 to 90% complete. So we're about 15 points above our regional average as far as harvest completion. At this point last year, we were actually 28% ahead of where we were at last year. Last year, we were actually only at 20, not at 28%. Lower or higher, we're actually at 28% harvested last year. So a significant advancement in harvest. And even as far as the 5-year average, we're 37 points above average as far as the harvest. So the weather that we saw this year definitely resulted in crop advancement, premature ripening. So we can see that harvest started earlier and is getting completed a lot quicker. Right now, as far as the crops remaining out, we're seeing a larger majority of like our canola and some of our specialty crops like potatoes and corn tend to be those that are out in large majority that need to be harvested yet. Some of the challenges we had this year obviously was the weather, the drought, lack of rain, and then of course getting some significant amounts of rain later on in the season when harvest started. So we did get a bit of a delay to harvest. It seems the fact that soil was so dry that the moisture we did get was quickly absorbed and didn't delay harvest significantly. As far as our yields right now, we get more and more yield information day to day. We're below average, definitely, and below average across the province. We're about at 70% of the 10-year average. The rest of the province is reporting at about 63% of the 10-year average. So yields are definitely lower. I mean, with some of our specific crops like peas, we're actually seeing some higher average yields this year compared to last year even. I guess some of the good news coming out of this, though, is the quality. Surprisingly enough, the quality of the crops, a large majority of the crops are coming in at grades 1 or 2. So they're right in line with our 5-year averages as far as yield goes. So yeah, and then I guess we hay and pasture, of course, or what we were seeing are took the biggest hits with the lack of moisture. We are seeing a small amount, about 1 to 5% of hay going into second cut right around now. We'll be awaiting yield information on that. Some of the initial reports are saying we're at about 30% lower on second cut yields compared to previous years at this point in time. The good news with some of that late moisture, it did help some of our hay crops and definitely pasture crops. And we'll see if we get anything further this fall, but we're starting to get reports that some of our surface and subsurface soil moisture is actually starting to move more into the good to fair as opposed to the poor. So I guess if we could take a positive out of this, the moisture is helping. I guess what will be the big thing is next year, and what we get as far as snowpack and spring moisture is when we're looking at really potentially the big impacts as far as cropping and especially to the livestock sector. So that is all I have at this point in time, and I can take any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Lusky, for that update. And if I can just get a motion to accept this presentation as information first, please.
Mr. Mayor, it's Councillor John McNabb, Division 5, and I'll bring forward a motion that the agricultural crop report update be accepted for information.
Thank you, Councillor McNabb. And I'll just open up to questions or comments. I am not seeing any. Councillor Melnick, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Do you have an idea or the information as to whether or not you're seeing that pattern consistent throughout the divisions of Parkland County, or is it, certain areas seeing much greater results than others, much more beneficial results than others?
Yeah, just like the moisture we had this year, it was really variable across the county. So not only provincially was it variable, even within regions of the county, it was variable. I mean, and we're talking differences of miles. So that variability we are seeing definitely across the entire county, where you can have fields a mile apart and yields are dramatically different. If we had to generally, we'd say out west, our yields tend to be a little bit lower out there. But again, it seems whether you want to say there's pockets or areas of differences, there's a lot of variability, and that's what's made it a challenge to get a good measure throughout the county, is that extreme variability across the municipality.
And I would ask the question, the possible results of why that variability is not only just about the condition weather-wise of the soil, but it is actually of that classification of the soils.
Yes, that plays another important factor, is the soil type. Out west, we're definitely heavier soils. So in some cases, the moisture conditions are exacerbated by the soil types. And especially like even in the south, when we had the significant amount of rainfall in September, likely a bit more or less of an impact of that significant. When I say significant, in some areas we were seeing, in those rain events early in September, up to upwards of 40 millimeters of rain. With the sandier soils, of course, even though it's dry and it's being absorbed, there's also that ability for it to leach down out of that root zone, and so we don't have a lot of standing water to impede to impede harvest. And of course, then you don't get as many muddy conditions as you do out west. Absolutely.
Yeah, and as a follow-up, and I think that's why, I hear from residents their frustration when, their request, and I know there's a piece in and around why we don't deem, zones of disaster. But that's why in the West End, for the most part, they don't understand why the councils don't declare disasters when Brazeau or Lac St. Anne or others have. And I know there's other reasons, but it's also too the fact that it's not across the board.
Any additional comments, questions from members of council? Mr. Luscu, I was speaking with a farmer, cow-calf operator on the weekend, and he was saying that his crops are, first crop of hay was down about 50% to 60%. Second crop, he did get a second crop, but it's down roughly 70%. Have you heard anything from our livestock producers, whether they are going to be forced to cull some of their herds? If you're able to even source or find feed, you're paying an exorbitant fee. So just wondering if you've had any conversations or heard anything from our beef producers.
Yeah, to be honest, we've heard from a very limited number throughout these conditions. I've actually only heard from two people, one being a livestock producer. And there was that concern. Again, we are seeing a lot of variability on that front, which has made our job difficult as far as putting this information together. Is you have some that are, we've had where some do have enough feed that they were going to be able to sell a little bit of feed or help out their neighbors, to others that were, not enough feed. They were on, fall pasture in summer, and so worried about having to sell the herd. And then when in our discussions with our Ag Service Board, of course, that's what we were really looking at, is the livestock. And even if some had made it through or had enough feed this fall and for the winter, again, it's the spring that's really going to be a concern. So from our perspective, it has been a very difficult situation to judge, just because we have had so much variability. And you also have to throw management factors into that as well too. As far as pasture management, even you look some of the hay crops that were cut earlier, those are the producers that we talked to that cut them earlier were quite pleased based on the conditions as far as the yields that they got. And so even that, again, it's the timing seemed to be really make a difference as far as the impact to yields and the ability for potentially a second cut or regrowth. And just with the overall situation throughout the Western Prairie provinces, yeah, that was a concern that we have, is monitoring feed. It's great to say that there's feed growing, but there's other places, even Southern Alberta, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, were in situations where they just didn't get anything. So of course, they're really scrambling to get whatever feed they can, making it even more difficult for producers here to source from other provinces to get feed to carry them through.
Thank you for that. So with that, we do have a motion to accept this report as information. Please raise your hand if you're in favor. That is carried. And Ms. Swain, we'll move over to item 5.4, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to invite Dave Cross, General Manager of Agriculture, Community, Sustainability, and Protective Services, to introduce our next guests. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Just wanted to do a little bit of an introduction to this item before passing it over to Ms. Erin McAdam and Ms. Susan Chafers, who's chair of our Agricultural Services Board, to present the item. As you know, one of the Agricultural Services Board's roles is to provide advice to council on matters related to agriculture in Parkland County. The item before you today is about a matter that impacts our producers, and the Ag Services Board is looking to try and address that matter by lobbying higher levels of government for change. The process for them in doing so is through resolutions that would be presented at their Regional Agricultural Services Board conference. And if supported at that level, they'd proceed to the Provincial Agricultural Services Board conference. And if supported there by the groups, it would then proceed on to the higher levels of government for their consideration. They are before you today to share advice with you on this matter and are seeking support for going forward with the resolution to try and address it. And with that, I'll turn things over to Ms. McAdam and Ms. Schaefers to run through the details around the resolution for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. So good morning. I'm pleased to be here today to support the Agricultural Service Board with the resolution regarding the exemption of natural gas and propane for agriculture use under the Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act. With that, I will pass the presentation over to Susan Schaefers, the chairperson of the Agricultural Service Board. Thank you.
Thanks, Erin. Good morning, Council. It's great to sort of see everybody, not in person like we'd want to, but I'm glad to be here nonetheless. So thank you very much for the opportunity to come forward on behalf of the ASB to request a decision on the following: the exemption of natural gas and propane for agriculture under the Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act. The Northwest Regional Conference is going to be held on October 27th, 2021. And Parkland County's Ag Service Board is requesting your support to bring forward a resolution on this matter of importance to area farmers. So as you probably know, the Agricultural Service Board doesn't only act as an advisory body to council, but we do assist the Minister of Agriculture by identifying issues that affect agricultural producers here locally and across the province. Next slide. So this just talks a little bit about the pillars that we have and the work plan that the ASB does. But we really have identified that the economic viability of farmers here in the county is being negatively affected by the carbon tax that's being applied to natural gas and propane. Next slide. So the Greenhouse Gas Pollution Act, which was adopted in June of 2018, places additional taxes on fossil fuels like gasoline and natural gas that are used here in many farming operations, even farms such as mine that are not grain farm based. The federal fuel charge started in January 2020 after the repeal of Alberta's carbon levy tax in May 2019. There are exemptions under the Act for fuel used in tractors, trucks, and other farm machinery. However, natural gas and propane used for grain dryers and heating barns is not exempt. Farmers here in the county are impacted with increased costs each year. And we're not able to pass that on to the consumers. The past 2 years have been very wet, and drying grain has really become very prevalent on all farming operations. Next slide, please. Bill C-206 was to amend that Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act and had gone as far as the third reading in the House of Commons and the first reading in the Senate prior to the summer break. However, as a result of the election being called, the federal election being called, it will not make it any further. Next slide, thank you. The federal government has indicated in the 2021 budget that a portion of the proceeds from the carbon tax will be returned to the farmers in Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Ontario beginning in 2021-2022. This portion is estimated to be $100 million in the first year, but there are no details on this commitment at the time. Budget 2021 had also committed $50 million for the purchase of more efficient grain dryers under the Agricultural Clean Technology Program. However, no programs were enacted to assist with other uses, and no new applications are being accepted and will not be considered until April 1st, 2022. However, we are now uncertain whether there will be any further funding made available. I hope you can read the numbers in the chart, but really from 2020 through to 2025, farmers in the major agricultural production areas, so they were talking about the prairie provinces and Ontario, so those production areas of the country are going to lose $235 million in revenue through the fuel surcharge. Next slide. So this resolution is requesting that there be an exemption for propane and natural gas for agricultural use. Specifically, this resolution states that therefore be it resolved that Alberta's Agricultural Service Board's request that the Government of Canada's Minister of Finance, with support from Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, amend the Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act to include natural gas and propane as exempted fuel for agricultural production. We are seeking council's support for this resolution, which supports our county's farming community, as well as those across our province. So that sort of concludes the presentation. Are there any questions from council?
Thank you very much for the presentation, and I will look for a mover for the motion and then open it up for comments and questions. Could I get a mover, please? Councillor Jensen.
Sorry, I didn't realize it was my turn. I would like to make the motion that council supports the Agricultural Service Board resolution to the Northwest Region Agricultural Service Board Conference, exemption of natural gas and propane for agriculture under the Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act.
Thank you very much. And I'll open up for comments or questions at this point. Councillor Capacitor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To Ms. Schaefer's and the Ag Services Board members and staff, I'm really excited about this coming forward. Not only did you point out that you're advising the mayor and council, Ms. Schaefer, that your job is also to give information and advise the minister. And you really raised the bar. This is why Ag Services Board participate on a regional basis and make recommendations to the minister. So the partnership with our board and mayor and council in having agreement and recognizing this is the way we can help farmers is, kudos to you. I'm really impressed. I'm really pleased. Our advisory boards are supposed to be having a partnership, making recommendations back to the council. Council doesn't have all the answers, and we've got experts on these advisory committees. So making these recommendations and advising council is exactly the kind of value added that is very exciting and makes this whole process work. So kudos to you. Thank you very much for doing this. Good work. You've raised the bar.
Thank you, Councillor Kabaziak. I do appreciate that. I think we really have a terrific team at the Ag Service Board with a really wide range of representation. Representation not just from the farmers themselves, but we do have members that live, in the area that are acreage owners. And so there's, I think, a lot of support both ways, and we're really doing that. I think we're also very lucky to be supported by the administrative team. And so kudos to them for helping make the presentation possible.
Councillor Jensen.
Yes, no, I'd like to thank you as well for the presentation. I know that this issue has been brought forward by the Western Economic Solutions Task Force through FCM, on which I believe Paul McLaughlin, who is the chair of president of RMA, would still be speaking to. It was established last year. I spoke to this when we met with the Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister of Western Economic Diversification. At that time, we were requesting a rebate in a different form, but my suggestion is that we align if we're going forward with this, maybe check in with RMA and FCM. It's my understanding that Robin Kerpowhite has been made the chair of the Rural Caucus, so he will be quite in the loop there as well, but perhaps with Paul McLaughlin directly and just see where they're at with this, because then it can be just a stronger and larger voice and make sure there's alignment there. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Jensen. I think that's a terrific suggestion. You know, we've got a little bit of time before we go to the Northwest region, and then if it passes there, of course, then to our AGM in the new year. You know, I can't imagine that the rest of the province wouldn't necessarily support this. You know, we've had a couple of very, very wet years. And I think while a lot of the focus is on grain farmers, I think it is important to recognize that other types of agriculture that require natural gas and propane are affected as well. So thank you for that suggestion. We'll be doing that for sure.
Any further comments or questions? Ms. Shavers, just one question I do have, and this is as a result of Councillor Jensen's recommendation, which I think is a very good recommendation to get alignment with other organizations. It positions the agricultural community in a better position, I believe, when you have a stronger unified base. When is the conference? And the reason I'm asking, we're approving the resolution or the motion you put forward here today. If there is some discussion with the RMA or any other organizations, there might be a different resolution that would require council support. That might have to be for new council. So just a question on the timing. When is that Regional Ag Service Board conference?
So that conference is on October 27th, so roughly a month, or almost exactly a month away. So yeah, so that process is it will go to them first. I think we have some time for the ASB. We have a meeting ourselves on Friday, October 8th. So we have a bit of a week maybe to find some information to bring it back to ASB. And then I'm not hugely familiar with Councillor Jensen's the various organizations and sort of how they fit together with ASB. So I think that maybe needs to be investigated a little bit. If we need to have a change, I don't know if it would actually require a change to this motion. I think it's more how the alignment could support the motion. I think that's sort of what I'm hoping we could bring forward by October 27th at the Northwest Regional Conference.
Thank you, Ms. Shavers. And I don't believe new council will have their first meeting at that point anyhow, but there certainly is an opportunity at the conference for amendments made to this motion as well. So I'll just look one final time to members of council if there's any additional comments or questions. And not seeing any, if you can raise your hand if you're in support of that motion, please. And that is carried unanimously, and we'll take a 5-minute recess. So we'll reconvene at 10:50. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Council. Have a great day.
Thank you. You as well. If I can get members of council, please put their video on so I can confirm everybody has returned from the break. Just waiting for Councillor McNabb, and then we'll bring the meeting back in. So I'll call the meeting back to order, and at this time I'll move to item G1 under Operation Service Matter, and this is addressing the vandalism at the Capacitor transfer station. I'll turn that over to Ms. Swain.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have Leo Gerard, who's our Director of Public Works, here to present addressing vandalism at the Capacitor transfer station, and he is able to answer any questions that council may have. Thank you, Mr. Gerard.
Thank you, Ms. Swain. Good morning, Mr. Mayor and members of council. So today before council for consideration is a report on addressing vandalism at the Capacitor transfer station. And in the report, administration brings forward the proposed motion that council receive for information and support administration's recommendation to include in the 2022 budget deliberations not to receive metals and electronics at the Capacitor transfer station for a one-year trial period. So by removing the incentive to vandalize and steal, this recommendation provides the greatest potential for success of the options considered to address vandalism at Capacitor. There are some other impacts to service levels with this recommendation. This option changes the service levels at the Capacitor transfer station, whereby customers will then be asked to travel longer distances to either the Parkland County transfer station, which is about a 20-minute drive southeast of Capacitor, or the Seawood Beach transfer station, which is again about a 20-minute drive to the west. In addition, this recommendation causes concern for the nearby community of Amisk Acres, in that vandalism and theft will then move into their community. So some information about the Capacitor transfer station. Pardon me, my apologies. The Capacitor transfer station is the largest rural transfer station in Parkland County. It's located on Township Road 533A, west of Range Road 35. It's in a remote location. It's open 3 days a week and receives approximately 250 customer visits every week. At the Capacitor transfer station, on a weekly basis, we receive approximately 2 tons of metal and about 3/4 of a ton of electronics. And as communicated earlier in public input from representatives of the Amisk Acres community, vandalism and theft has been experienced at the Capacitor transfer station over multiple previous years. So Parkland County and Amisk Acres representatives have been working collaboratively on sharing information on the community's experiences, as well as Parkland County's previous activities to address the vandalism, and strategizing on potential solutions to address the vandalism. In a proactive manner, addressing the incentive for vandalism and theft will have the greatest positive potential for success. And metals and electronics are the items that are the most desirable for vandals. Therefore, administration is recommending to not receive metals and electronics for a 1-year trial period at the Capacitor transfer station. And during that period of time, we will assess the successes and the processes going forward. Should mention as well, in discussion with Acres representatives, they are in support of the strategies to address the incentives. However, Acres representatives would rather reduce the stockpiles on site rather than no longer receive metals and electronics on site. There's a cost associated with that option. And I draw attention to attachment 1, where we talk about the options, and to go the route of reducing stockpiles on site, but still receiving metals and electronics. We're looking at an estimated projected cost of $28,000 increased in annual budget. We do believe as administration that going the route of not receiving metals and electronics is the most cost effective and the most effective opportunity for success. I should mention as well that throughout these many years where we've had vandalism on site at Capacitor, we've been engaging with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police as well as Parkland County's Enforcement Services. And although both agencies are empathetic and sympathetic and want to assist, their resources are limited and cannot provide a larger presence, a greater presence at this location. So with that information, welcome the opportunity for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gerard. And if I can get a mover for this motion, please, Councillor Capacitor.
Mr. Chair, it's my turn to make a recommendation in the speaking order, but Ms. Penstone did mention working with Councillor for the area, McNabb, so I'll defer to him on this item.
Councillor McNabb, did you want to put that motion forward, please?
Sorry, just had to bring it back up. You know, I have been working with Ms. Pepstone with this, and I'm going to bring forward this motion that council received this report for information, but I'm going to struggle with the recommendation. So I'm going to bring it forward as written, but I'd like to have a conversation about that. Council received this report for information, the Sport Administration's recommendation to include in the 2022 budget deliberation not to receive metals and electronics at the Capacitor transfer station for a 1-year trial period. I'll bring forward that motion, but I'd like to speak to it.
And the floor is yours, Councillor McNabb.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm just going to pop back to the recommendation here. And I'm not going to support that motion. And the reason I'm not going to support that motion, I think there's opportunity to look at other type of recommendations. And I would ask Mr. Gerard a question in regards to the other transfer station. He did mention that this is our largest rural transfer station. And I struggle with closing down the ability to take metals and or whatever product, what that's going to do to our other rural transfer stations. Is that just going to push the problem off to them? I don't see this as a solution, and I'm struggling with that. And I would sure like to have a conversation and or other options on our plate. Because this is our largest rural transfer station, and just closing down or simply saying we don't want whatever product it might be, what's that going to do to our other transfer stations? If Mr. Gerard could speak to that. And if we're going to push the problem off, or do we already have problems at our other rural transfer stations? I just look for a little bit of information there.
So through the chair, Councillor McNabb, very good questions, actually. The impacts to other rural transfer stations, there's a potential that we may see an increase in vandalism at other transfer stations. What makes the Capacitor transfer station unique is, again, it's the largest one, so it receives the largest amount of metal, and also the proximity of the transfer station to, say, other nearby illegal activities. It's very convenient for vandals to grab metals, take off site, sell, and then go to do their criminal activities, if you will. I'm not going to sit here and say that it won't impact by not having metals and electronics at Capacitor, that it won't impact other sites. If any sites will be impacted, it will be the Seba Beach site. We are hoping and encouraging that the metals and electronics that would have gone to Capacitor would go to Parkland County Transfer Station, where it's not remote. It's open significantly longer or significantly more days of the week. It's more active, hardly any vandalism at the Parkland County Transfer Station.
Thank you, Mr. Gerard. So another option that could possibly be brought forward in time, and you know, other than just simply closing down this ability to receive these goods, would be improvement of that transfer station. And improvement of that transfer station, which I mean is providing a little bit more border security and or options within the transfer station to, and I hate to go down a path of housing the problem items, but maybe there's other options that could be brought forward from administration in regards to keeping the items coming into that transfer station and possibly improving that transfer station to receive those items that are in question. And I do recognize that I've been by the transfer station. I do recognize it be considered remote, but it is a rural transfer station. We have many rural transfer stations in Parkland County. So what about a different option coming forward other than just simply closing it down? What closing down the acceptance of those items? What other options could be coming forward in time?
So through the chair to Councillor McNabb, we have explored options in the past. And as I'm talking about it, I want to definitely communicate, we are open-minded to look at options to address vandalism. Other options that have been considered in the past are such things as making the perimeter of the site better lit, if you will, addressing trails that tend to show up unplanned trails. We've also worked with our enforcement group, and they've come up with some recommendations to remove the foliage between Township Road 533A and the transfer station, thereby making it more visible to the road as a deterrent for vandalism. What it tends to come back to is vandals will test to see how far they can get away with. And if they can get away with stuff before the response time for people to act and catch them in the act, then they're going to get away with it. Where I'm going with this is we need either the assistance of RCMP or enforcement services, or we need to take measures to gain our own private security on that site. In the case of RCMP and enforcement services, resources are not there. In the case of private site security, that is effective to address vandalism. It's also very expensive. So we're really open to ideas. That was one of the reasons why we wanted to work with Amisk Acres. Between the two groups, put our minds together, see what we can come up with. I don't want to close the door on this. If there's something we haven't considered, then let's go back to the drawing board and consider it.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I know I got some other council members with hands up, and I just got one other question. And I historically, over a number of years, last 20 years, I do realize other transportation. And I'll just go back to Keep Hills because I know Keep Hills transfer station has significant amount of break-ins also in over the years. And I've talked to I'm looking for the right word, custodian of the Keep Hills transfer station, who has even lost the little shack that he uses, has lost items out of that shack, you know, and garbage out in front of the ditches. You know, it's not only to the Capacitor transfer station, it's every rural transfer station that has potential to have this impact. Do we look at it holistically, not just one? If we can improve one, can we improve them all? And that's kind of where I would be going at with that. But I'll leave it up to the other council members that have their hands up. Maybe they have other ideas also.
Councillor Melnick.
Thank you very much. I actually also would have concern with the proposed motion as it sits. 2 points. One being that really trying to just solve the problem with the hammer doesn't usually always work, right? So as was indicated, they'll just head to somewhere else, or they will find whatever they're seeking in other means, in other ways. So whether it be in their own personal yards of the residents in that area or residents of Parkland County, they'll just find those things anyway. So I guess the other piece I would have would be $28,000 in a budget of our size. Well, I know that we have always instructed administration to look for the cost savings and make the best decisions forward for not only our budgets, but for the service levels of the residents. I think $28,000 actually is a small amount. I think we need to be able to try to figure out how to make that work in a different manner. So whether it be through other contracts that we have or whether, you know, throughout the whole organization, $28,000 should be easily found, I would guess. One of the things, and it's a struggle at all of the rural transfer stations is around people wanting to access and take whatever they can. And I know that we have a philosophy around the county about it being the liability of not being able to dumpster dive and grab metals and things like that. But there's also another side of it, is to say, are we being too cautious on that end? Should we allow people to come during the day when we actually are there and it can be supervised to see who's coming and who's going, to allow people to take things that they could use? To me, it just seems logical. I think if we're weighing out the liability, you know, I'm sure that there can be some wording that indicates to say, you know, you're dumpster diving at your own risk. There's got to be something that could be done on a different manner. And the last option I would potentially put out there and ask the question and feedback on is in and around having guard dogs at our transfer sites. You know, possibly that's what we're going to have to start going through. One big old bite on the backside might deter the next guy coming in. And you know, they can be pets and they can be guard dogs, and I don't know how we would deal with that. So yes, somebody would have to go out and feed them and maintain and you know, check things out, but we need to be able to figure out different solutions than just saying, okay, now we're going to take it away and you're not going to be able to do it. That doesn't work for the residents. It's just making everybody become more centralized in all our services, and that really truly in my mind doesn't serve our residents. Thanks.
Councilor Capacitor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the comments, Mr. Gerard, in terms of how we're looking at addressing this and the options that are available. I think one other concern is we've got two locations that have been identified. Actually, you know, we've got the Capacitor site that where the problem is occurring, but the community and Ms. Penstone's comments, working with a couple of other people, have identified they have an idea of where the source of the problem is coming from. And you mentioned working with RCMP. So you've got the problem and you've got possibly the other part of where this problem is coming from. You know, I'm getting a sense that there may be an opportunity to better discuss this with the community, have more of a dialogue and discuss, you know, I don't know how much of this has been shared with the members of the community as an option, but maybe there's something else in talking and working with the community and working with the RCMP that we might be able to come up with something better. That seems like a possibility, because they've kind of nailed down in the community, but they're watching where this problem is coming from, and that needs to be addressed.
Comments from other members of council? No, just a couple of comments, and I agree with some of the concerns raised by my colleagues on council. Does this push the issue out to some of our other sites, Seba Beach being one? Yeah, it'd be great to say everybody will take those, 2 tons of metal and 3/4 of a ton of electronics to the Stony Plain site. I don't think in reality that will occur. What's the potential that people will just come frustrated and we have illegal dumping of some of these? Most of our residents are very responsible. There might be some that decide, hey, I'm not driving it that far. If the county can't afford to maintain this, the county can pick it up at their own cost. So there could be roadside dumping as well. Councillor Melnick's put out another option is, do we look at what is the risk and liability and exposure of having guard dogs on there? I think that's something we need to explore as well. And I guess the final question I have is, have we had discussions and reached out to other rural municipalities? This isn't isolated to Parkland County only. I know Yellowhead County has had similar challenges at their peers site. There's probably other municipalities. Have they implemented any initiatives or projects or programs to curb some of the activities that they have? I think that needs to be explored, whether that has been done or not. And maybe there's an opportunity here for next council to get a resolution, take it to our zone meeting, to look for some funding from the provincial government to address this issue, because it, like I said, it's not isolated to Parkland County. This is province-wide at rural transfer sites. Thank you.
So in response to your question, Mr. Mayor, yeah, most rural municipalities are faced with the same challenge. And to date, there are no, I'm going to say, magic bullets, if you will. Parkland County is seizing the opportunity to work with the community of Amisk Acres to see if there's something out there. Yeah, and there's many options, and there's impacts to those options. So what I'm hearing from yourself, Mayor Chagas, as well as members of council, is let's explore other options and bring it back.
Thank you. And before I go back to Councillor Melnick, we talked about one option is more frequent transfer of these metals off the site at the $28,000. How many times a week would that be?
So the $28,000 would mean it would be a weekly collection. And currently, to give you some magnitude, some perspective, currently metals are collected approximately once a month, depending on volumes and seasonality.
Thank you for that. Councillor Melnick.
Thank you. Mayor Chagas, you asked about Yellowhead County. Are they doing anything differently? And I will indicate through my experience, as my partner has the rights to use Yellowhead County dumps or transfer stations, as we may want to call them. They allow people to go through and seek metals that they need. They allow that. So I guess for me, and it's always been a burr in my side as to us weighing the thought of liability of allowing somebody to gather metals, gather whatever in the hours of operation that we are there. I still think that that's got to be an option. One or two incidences of somebody slipping into a pile, I don't think should have resulted in us not allowing people to use product. There's many reasons why people go and they grab that little drum out of the wash machine because they're making a fire pit or they're doing something. And I think that, we talk about recycling, we talk about a whole pile of other avenues, but then we throw down, well, liability, we can't do that. So I think that there needs to be another conversation with council of the day in and around what risk are they willing to accept on behalf of Parkland County. We can't just keep shutting things down because we're scared of a liability or because in a large urban center they don't allow it or they don't allow certain activities. So we're rural, we need to stay rural, and we need to accept the fact that other people do recycle for whatever their purpose. But you know what, if we're worried about the the nighttime activity of people taking material when nobody's there, possibly letting them take it while we're there would be a much safer area for the residents. Thanks.
Any additional comments from members of council? And Councillor Melnick, thank you for sharing Yellowhead County's approach. And perhaps it's a conversation that our administration can have with Yellowhead is, have there been any incidents of personal injury there? What sort of direction or recommendations or advice has their legal counsel provided them on enabling their residents to go through and sift through and reuse. Because as Councilor Mel said, it's about recycling. We've all heard the different if we can reuse, repurpose, we're doing the environment a favor here as well. So there's opportunities. The only other comment I make is, and this is, I guess, something for our residents to consider, because our electronic collection, if there are items like computers, my understanding is all that personal data is removed. The county takes it in, it's removed. So if our members or residents bring electronics in, like a laptop, and it has personal information, there is potential, I guess, exposure to risk there. Councillor McNabb.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Shagets. In lieu of the conversation, I'd like to propose a tabling motion. I think that's the proper procedure here. Would be bring forward a tabling motion that administration take back the conversation that we had here and bring forward to at a later date. And I would ask Mr. Gerard on that later date, and I'd like to put a date to this and bring back to council, and I know it would be a new council, other options including costs, and other options including costs, and based upon the conversation we just had. And I would look for Mr. Gerard on a date that could possibly happen.
So through the chair, Councillor McNabb, in order for administration, or in order to influence the 2022 budget deliberations, we need to get on this sooner rather than later. Administration has already looked at some of the options and alternatives and put together some costs. It's exploring further, and we can have continued discussion with other rural municipalities. We'd need to engage with our legal counsel to determine what the risk is to liability, to have a fulsome picture. I would offer and suggest that we would be able to get back to you around mid-November of this year. I'm not sure how that would influence our budget deliberations, but that would be kind of the time frame.
Thank you very much. And so I would add that into my proposed tabling motion.
So we have a table in motion put forward by Councillor McNabb. Those in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. So there is direction there for administration. With that, we will move to item B2, please, Ms. Swain. And Mr. Gerard, thank you for the presentation this morning.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I have Mark Fitch, Director of Strategic Initiatives, along with Stefan Vanderberg, Construction Manager, and they have joined us to present the Project Management Office update and answer any questions that Council may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Swain. Just sharing my screen. Hopefully everybody can see it. So we're here today to present to Council the Construction Management update. So the projects that we'll be going through is the Parkland County Transfer Station, Entwistle Pool and Community Hub, West Central Fire Hall, and the Atchison Fire Hall remediation. This is a high-level budget and where we are compared to budget. So for the Entwistle Pool and Community Hub, the approved budget is $9.75 million. Expenditures to date are $9,055,000, and we have an estimate of $244,000 to complete the project, which would put us in at $9.3 million, which is around $450,000 under budget. For the West Central Fire Hall, we have an approved budget of $8.8 million. Expenditures to date are $5.461 million. And we estimate that we'll need the remainder of the funds. And at this point, we're estimating that we'll come in at budget of $8.8 million. For Parkland County Transfer Station, approved budget was $8.1339 million. And expenditures to date are $7.222 million. And we estimate to complete the project that we need an additional $477,000. Put us in at 7.7 million. And that would leave us at an estimate of 433,000 under budget. And for the Atchison Fire Hall rehabilitation, budget was 1 million. Expenditures to date are 152,000. And then we estimate that we'll need the additional 847,000 as this is an ongoing project. And that would bring us in on budget at $1 million. What we'll go through now is a little bit more detailed breakdown of the projects. And these are all the categories and where we'll end, how it gets us to the estimated budget that we'll end up with, or estimated actual expenditures that we'll end up with. So on the PCTS, design was approximately 956,000. Construction is 5.5 million. General requirements, 944,000. And then office is 263,000, which brings us to the 7.7 million. For the Entwistle Pool and Community Hub, we've got design of 696,000. And then under construction, general requirements of 3.78 million, substructure of 911,000. The shell was 717,000. Interior is 890,000. Services 65,000. Furniture, fixtures, and equipment is 350,000. And the pool was 1.885 million, which gets us to the 9.3 million estimated to complete the project. For the West Central Fire Hall, design was 578,000. The demo was 294,000. Construction 7.27 million. General requirements 489,000. Permitting 51,000. Testing 58,000. Survey 55.9, which brings us in at our 8.8 million, which is our estimated to completion. And then finally, Atchison Fire Hall remediation. Design was 249,000. Monitoring is 40,000. Geotechnical 23,400. And then construction is estimated at 687,000, which brings us in at the 1 million. And the work that we'll be doing this year on the Atchison Fire Hall is some work on the west side apron and the east side apron as well, which will include some demolition and then rebuilding the sidewalk that goes along the building. And that's what will be completed this year. And then we'll continue to monitor this and see what additional remediation is required in future years. And with that, I'll turn it back to council for any questions that they may have.
Thank you, Mr. Fitch, for the presentation. I had a mover for that motion, Councillor Melnick.
Thank you. I can put forward the motion that the project management office update be received for information as presented. And I do have a question. Thank you. So underneath the West Central Fire Hall, there's 51,560 in permitting. So whereas we don't have permitting in any of the other files. And so just wondering, is it a different way of now, because we know what's going in, out, is it just a way of costing and where the appropriate departments are using their resources, just like we do with fleet, or maybe I'm missing something here? Thanks.
Through the mayor to Councillor Melnick. Yes, some of it is internal, but then there's also other levels of government that other levels of organizations that we have to deal with as well on permitting, but we do not double count the revenue. So it's not a, I don't know if I'm explaining it exactly correctly, but it's an internal thing. So it's just a cost recovery for that department as opposed to actual income.
Yeah, thanks. I was just confused because we didn't do that with the pool where, there would have been permit costs as well. It didn't show up in your pieces there, but I thought that's what it was, but thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Other comments, questions? I have one question. It's not really to do anything with this presentation. It's more of an operational matter, and that has to do with the transfer site, the Parkland transfer site just outside of, well, it's inside the municipal boundaries of the town of Stony Plain. But I do use that facility, and I've spoken with residents who use that facility, and you know, great upgrades, and it's certainly a lot easier to navigate through there, particularly inside, and it's a lot larger. But a lot of the recycling is away from that general facility. We've in graveled roads. We've got a lot of pavement on there. There's bins available. Why isn't the recycling close to the newly expanded area on the paved ground? And I believe it's even safer unloading those products than what's set up in some of the other areas. And I'm not sure, Mr. Fitch, it's probably not for you to answer. And I'm not sure if anybody who's on the call can answer, but if we can get an explanation, if not today, at some point in the future. Thank you.
Yeah, we can, to the mayor and council, we can definitely go back and get an answer. That would be more on the operational side, but we can definitely get an answer for council on that.
Thank you. Any other questions on the presentation that we've had? Not seeing any. If you can raise your hand if you're in favor of that motion, please. And that is carried unanimously. We'll now move to item D1 under Agriculture, Community, and Protective Services Matters. Ms. Swain.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have Sarah Mate, Director of Community Services, who has joined us to present the 2022 Recreation and Culture Capital Cost Share Request and answer any questions council may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Swain. Good morning, Mayor Shagas and members of council. Parks, Recreation and Culture is presenting recommendations for the Recreation Capital Cost Share requests that we have received from our municipal partners. These requests address life cycle and standard maintenance activities that ensure the effective, efficient operation of these facilities that serve Parkland County residents. As part of the recreation cost share agreements we have with our municipal partners, council may, at their discretion, provide funding support for capital repairs or upgrades at the facilities outlined in each of the agreements. Administration has received requests from the City of Spruce Grove, the Town of Stony Plain, the Town of Drayton Valley, and Yellowhead County. The details of the requests are outlined in your agenda. Administration supports all of the requests. Supporting these items ensures our residents continue to have access to facilities that are well maintained, safe, and efficient, as well as ensuring a consistent level of service. This concludes my presentation today. I'd be happy to answer any questions council may have.
Thank you, Ms. Mate. So we do have 4 motions for council's consideration. Can I get a mover for that first motion? Councillor Jensen, can you bring that forward, please?
I sure can. I'll make the motion that council approve up to $29,317.65 for the City of Spruce Grove's 2022 capital cost share request as presented.
Thank you. Questions on the first motion? Seeing none, please raise your hand if you're in favor. And that is carried unanimously. If I can get a mover for the second motion. Councillor Capacitor.
Mr. Chair, Councillor Capacitor, thank you. I move that council approve up to $3,850 for the Town of Stony Plain's 2022 capital cost share request as presented.
Any comments or questions on this motion? Seeing none, please raise your hand if you're in favor. That is carried unanimously. A mover for the third motion, Councillor Hollins.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that council approve up to $804.39 for the Town of Drayton Valley's 2022 capital cost share request as presented.
Thank you. Comments or questions? please raise your hand if you're in favor. That is carried, and we have one more motion on this item. Councillor McNabb.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. That council approve up to $44,750 for Yellowhead County's 2022 capital cost share request as presented.
Thank you. And Councillor Mellon, question?
Yes, thank you. Just a comment. Is it common that we will see the snow removal as put in part of? It's a large portion. It's $20,000. I don't recall that in the past, but possibly I just don't recall it. I wonder whether or not that really is the operation of the facility, or it's actually really a municipality's obligation to keep that area cleared. Thanks.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Shegas, to Councillor Melnick. That is a great question. It actually boils down to accounting differences. The Yellowhead County, anything over $5,000 is classified as capital. And so what happens is when they give us their reports on how they spend the capital that we've approved, and then also the operational contribution as well, we cross-reference those just to make sure that that's what we're being charged for, and that it's not anything over and above that or a double charge.
Thank you for that explanation, Ms. Mate. Any additional questions or comments on this item? I am not seeing any. Please raise your hand if you're in favor. And that is carried unanimously. Thank you, Ms. Mate, for the presentation. And we'll move to item D.2, Ms. Swain.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Suzanne Merrills, Supervisor of Recreation and Culture, is prepared to present the Magnolia Community League Sustainability Grant, major capital requests, and answer any questions council may have. Thank you.
Thank you. To Mayor and Council, I am here today to present to you the Magnolia Community Club's request for $25,000 under the Sustainability Grant major grant application. The board for the Magnolia Club has developed a very ambitious long-range plan to update their facility in line with the recommendations made in the 2019 Facility Conditions Report. The ask today will allow the Community League to build a vestibule at the front entrance to improve safety and energy efficiency of their hall. The Community League has also applied for federal and provincial funding for the additional projects that make up the balance of their $525,000 plan. Should they not be successful in securing additional funds, they will postpone the additional projects. The Community League has met the requirements of the Sustainability Grant Program, and administration supports this request. This concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much, Councillor Melnick.
We're going to put forward the motion that council approve the Magnolia Community Club Sustainability Grant, major capital request in the amount of $25,000 to be included in the 2022 budget as presented. I've spoken with a few of the members there. They really are adhering and taking that report as their gospel binder that they need to work with. So I think that really does go to show that it's a group that is wanting to be there. They're aligning to the county's vision as to how do we keep and maintain our buildings. So totally support this. I know that they have a whole pile of different projects that they like to do out there and wanting to do. Just going to throw the plug in. I think they're wanting to throw in their next pickleball courts, big thing there. That's going to be one of their other pieces. So they're not a dying organization. Lack of volunteers is kind of where I'm getting at. They really are trying to keep momentum moving in there. And I think part of that is by reinvesting in their hall. Thanks.
Thank you. Any additional comments or questions? Seeing none, please raise your hand if you're in favor of the motion. And that is carried unanimously. Thank you, Ms. Merrills, for that. With that, we'll move to item F, corporate and shared service matters, item F1, Ms. Swain.
Mr. Mayor, if I can interrupt, we have a D3, the community recreation update. Are we going to do that one?
My apologies. Yes, we'll go to D3. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So Suzanne will also be presenting the Entwistle Community Recreation Center update and answer any questions council may have. Thank you.
Thank you. To Mayor and Council, I'm here to provide an update on the operations in the Entwistle Community Recreation Center. This fall will mark 1 year of being open to the public. Due to the current pandemic, we had a phased opening in the fall of 2020, starting with the library, followed by opening our customer service counter, and then finally the pool this past summer. Our customer service satellite location allows residents to access many services that can be accessed at the main office, such as the tax and utility payments, fire permits, enforcement complaints, waste transfer cards, and purchase of maps. For those services that we cannot offer in person at the satellite location, we can support residents by providing a drop-off pickup location between our facility and the main office, printing off forms and emailing them in on their behalf. Those accessing the services have commented on how nice it is to not have to drive into the city anymore. The pool opening was delayed due to COVID-19 restrictions. We were fortunate enough to be able to open the facility just before school let out, allowing the Entwistle School students to be the first to use the facility. Rapid changing regulations had us pivoting a few times this summer, but we settled in and were able to offer 4 sessions of swimming lessons, public swim rentals, and launch a brand new online registration software. We had many requests for Aquafit, however, we were unable to secure an instructor for the program. Lessons were busy and well utilized, with 210 people registering in our programs, which equates to 80% fill rate on our lessons. We were also able to run some leadership courses, which we hope to build on the momentum in 2022 and develop staff from within the community. Public saw a great turnout, with many swims maxing out and having to turn people away. This can be attributed to many factors, including that we were a brand new facility, our affordable entry fees, our pre-registration, and an unseasonably warm summer. Due to COVID, we had implemented a pre-registration system at the start of the season, and as the summer went on, we made the decision to keep the registration system in place due to the high numbers we were seeing. The public made many comments about how they appreciated knowing that they had a spot and made the drive worth it. Out of the approximately 3,500 patrons that we saw this summer in public swim, 41% came from Parkland County, 23 from Yellowhead, and the remaining 36 were visitors to the region. With fall upon us and the facility a little quieter, we are shifting our focus back to the completion of a few outstanding construction items that we weren't able to complete with patrons in the facility, as well as a skate park and play features for the outdoor space. As we wrap up this first season, we have learned many things and continue to adjust our operations accordingly. Some aspects that we have identified to work on include communication within the direct community, aquatic programming changes in staffing levels, and programming options to fully utilize the facility in the off season. And with that, that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And this is one of the last items we'll have here. And this is the last council meeting for Councilor Melnick. So would you like to bring this motion forward?
Absolutely. I'll bring forward the motion. The Entwistle Community Recreation Center update presentation be received for information as presented. And, you know, when I said it when we had the mini opening, I guess, ceremonies there, but, you know, council outside of Councilor McNabb weren't able to attend on that day. And I just really, really want us to acknowledge and thank Suzanne. Suzanne went over and above this summer. She put in insurmountable amount of overtime to ensure that the pool operated when they could. We lost our manager that was hired, so Suzanne filled in that role. And then of course, her other staff and at the home office that picked up some of the duties that possibly that she had to leave behind. But without Suzanne's dedication to making sure that that pool worked this summer, we wouldn't have had the results that they did. I know that there was some frustrations as to why the pool wasn't open maybe a little bit more than what it was, but speaking with Suzanne, it truly was in and around having to bring work with the lifeguard schedules as to what they had. I don't know, Suzanne, if you want to kind of elaborate a little bit more about the challenges in and around lifeguarding. And I think you should, or I would invite you to, as to why that was a challenge this year. And I know that is possibly maybe an anomaly because of the COVID, but I would, if it's okay with council, I would like Suzanne to comment about the challenges in and around lifeguarding. Thanks.
Sure, through you, Mayor, through to Councillor Melnick. Yeah, we throughout the province and actually nationally and internationally, there is a lifeguard shortage that has been identified. Every pool in Alberta and in Canada has been having kind of similar issues where COVID plays a big role in that shortage. We have a lot of lifeguards that went and found jobs during COVID when they were all let go of their pool recreation positions when all pools were closed for so many months. So they've gone on and moved on to different careers in their life. We also had a pool of candidates that have never been trained. So we did lose about 18 months of training of staff, and many pools were able to continue with a little bit of in-house training for current staff, but it was very difficult to do any training of new potential 16-year-old candidates that we could mold into the next generation of staff. So there's a lot of catch up to be done in the industry in terms of staff training and building up those staff pools everywhere for all lifeguards in all facilities. So that lifeguard shortage does mean that most pools were running at the mercy of what guards were available as opposed to what our ideal schedules were.
Thanks, Susanna. And I jokingly said to staff, please, I'm not stalking you. I drive around and that pool was just full all the time, anytime it was opened. And again, Suzanne, you and your team did an amazing job, and it so warmed my heart to see that first jumps in when those kids came in from the school. It kind of made my ending of my time here on council just really, really worth it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Any additional comments or questions? Well, it's not just the pool. It's such a great amenity for the west part of Parkland County, something that I know the residents are proud of, and I think council and administration should be proud of that facility as well. It is a fantastic building, and it's going to serve that region, our residents, Yellowhead residents, and Ms. Merrills gave some of the figures of the attendance in the pool. People from outside the region will be using it as well. And I do have a question, and I think because of the pandemic, we had to book people in, so we did. I'm assuming we've got the information regarding the municipality that those individuals came from. Do you have a breakdown or the largest percentage of that 36%, I believe it is? You'd mentioned 41% were Parkland County residents, 23 were Yellowhead. And do you have a breakdown of the top 2 or 3 other municipalities where those residents come from?
Yes, great question, Mayor. I don't have the specifics directly in front of me, but if I recall off the top of my head, I believe we were at about 6% from Edmonton and 5 or 6% from Spruce Grove, with some coming. We had I think 6% from Brazeau County as well.
Okay, thank you. So, and I asked this question because sometimes we get comments from our colleagues to say, well, those facilities out there, our residents will never use them. And we see that they are. So thank you for the presentation. If there's no further comments or questions from members of council, we do have the motion on the floor. Please raise your hand if you're in favor. And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. So now we'll move to item F1. Ms. Swain, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have Charlene McLean, Chief Information Officer, who has joined us to present the Microsoft Enterprise Agreement and answer any questions council may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Swain. Good morning, Mr. Mayor and councillors. I'm here to present the renewal of the Microsoft Enterprise Agreement over a 3-year agreement. This extends beyond the 2021 budget, therefore needing council approval. Parkland County signed the first enterprise agreement in 2010, renewed for 3 years in 2015 and in 2018, and is now renewing in 2021 for a 3-year period. It encompasses all software licensing costs for Microsoft products, including our Office 365, which is Windows-based, and Dynamics 365. That includes my presentation. I can now open it up to questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McLean, for the presentation. Can I get a mover for that motion, please?
Mr. Mayor, it's Councillor Jensen, Division 1. I'll make the motion that administration be directed to renew the Microsoft Enterprise Agreement for a 3-year term as presented.
Thank you. Comments or questions? Seeing none, please raise your hand if you're in favor. And that is carried unanimously. Thank you very much, Ms. McLean. And
Thank
with
you.
that, we'll move to communications and committee reports. And I will start with Councillor Melnick, please.
Thank you very much. So I did attend a meeting with PARS. I think that one of the interesting things that came out of that meeting was they're struggling in and around how they were going to be operating in and around vaccine, non-vaccine. You know, do they do the 1/3 capacity that can be allowed, or do they do the piece where you need to show your vaccinations? An interesting piece that came from there is they threw out the potential idea that maybe let's see if we can split the building and say, because if we did 1/3 capacity, then of course all adult programming would not be able to go ahead. So, and they have quite a strong pickleball group there, probably at least 40, 50 people that play either mornings or evenings. So they were quite concerned about how they would cut that out. So they threw the idea, can we split the building? And they took it to AHS, and they did. They split the building. So they have the adult programming, which must show vaccinations, using one entrance out the back. The entrance or the connecting doors between them are closed. And then the arena side, they have where they are 1/3 capacity. And for us out here, it made sense that they could do 1/3 capacity safely, in the sense that it can house, I think they said, seating of 700 people. So with the 1/3 capacity, mostly it's just the little tykes and their parents, because there was a concern from the arena staff. If you make them show vaccinations, parents may not have them. We do not have probably as high of an uptake in getting the vaccinations out in the west of Parkland and Yellowhead. So they went with it. The hockey guys were didn't know which way to go themselves, because they had felt that they would lose a number of their participants if we did mandatory vaccinations. So I thought it was interesting that actually Alberta Health Services allowed them to split the building, because they can lock the connecting doors and have different entrances. So with that, that's my last of my committee reports. But if I may indulge a little bit, I just want to also take the time to thank the residents of Division 6 for allowing me the opportunity to represent them for the past 14 years. It truly has been my pleasure. To the administration and staff, you guys are top notch. Don't let anybody tell you guys anything different. You're top notch, and Parkland County's really, really fortunate to have you. I didn't think I'd do this. To my current and my past colleagues, wow, what a journey it's been. And I wish each of all of you guys the best in whatever you decide to do next, whether it be return to council, whether it be school trustee, whether it be just take a different path in your life. It's been an amazing journey. I've really enjoyed it. And I'm not going to say I'm going to miss it, because I chose not to run. But I really am appreciative of all the staff and the relationships that I've built. Thanks.
A virtual Kleenex for you. Thank you, Councillor Melnick, for your service. Councillor McNabb.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I do not have any committee reports at this time.
Councillor Hollins.
Nothing to report, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Councillor Capacitor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to report that the Alice Committee group met last week, the PAC, and did welcome its 3 new members, Jesse Northcott, Grant Chellier, and Adrian Vanderwell. And it was really a nice opportunity for the new members to be bringing in some really great fresh ideas and working with the existing members on that board. It's going to provide a very, very strong, cohesive group, and working with our administration, I see some very positive things with Alice. And thank you.
Councillor Jensen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. A few things to report on. The Headwaters Alliance Technical Advisory Committee, on which I sit with the chair and as vice chair, met last week with a fairly heavy agenda. We don't meet as often as we'd like to, but as well the group itself, the steering committee, met. And we covered a number of items here prior to election. The report of the Technical Advisory Committee, which included the Riparian Strategic Plan, the Riparian Health Action Plan, the Riparian Web Portal, the Wetland Strategy, as well as the EPCOR Water Monitoring Project. So there's lots going on in the headwaters and significant gains that have been made in the past 4 to 5 years that we're very, very proud of. And I'm sure that work will continue on into the election, though there will be a number of new faces at that table. Of course, that's up to organizational meetings, but there's a number of people not running again that have been participating in that. So there'll be a learning curve. River Valley Alliance met as well a couple weeks ago. And the focus right now for the RVA is the naming of the trail. A subcommittee has been struck. Members range from public board members, 1 councillor, planners from 3 municipalities, and Parkland County is represented by Carolyn Bjornson, our community development coordinator. So we do have presence at that table, which I appreciate. The public members consist of Travel Alberta, Fort Edmonton, the Downtown Business Association, the Director of Indigenous Initiatives at MacEwan University, and the Confederacy of Treaty 6 First Nations. There'll be 2 phases. They expect the subcommittee to be meeting for about 6 months. And if we recall, they did come to us in February, give their presentations to council. In March, a subcommittee of the board was formed. April 21st, the shareholders voted unanimously to accept the joint statement of intent and proceed with the naming of the trail at the AGM. So they're figuring about 6 months from now. They came forward with a recommendation to hire an Indigenous consultant to help facilitate the engagement of reaching out to the 30 plus nations and Métis communities that should be engaged around the trail naming. Not saying that will be the outcome, but ensuring that that engagement occurs properly. My last Sturgeon River Watershed Alliance meeting, which will hold some emotion for me as well. So the agenda tomorrow will be dealing with water quality sampling, the overlay maps, and hazard lands environmental reserves as technical updates from our TAC. And we, as kind of one of the first action items we took from the state of our watershed report, our management report, we had a great meeting a couple months ago, and only I would say this is a nerd, around salt management techniques. And each municipality talked about what they do for salt management so that we can begin to align policies. So that's very interesting as well. We'll also be discussing repairing, conservation, and restoration strategy. And really what's important to me and has been as chair is that we ensure that the new members coming on to the Alliance, as well as all newly elected councillors and mayors, are aware of the important work, critical work of the North Saskatchewan watershed going forward, as well as the Sturgeon River Watershed Alliance. So there will be communications coming from the SRWA to the new mayors and councils promptly after the election. And that's it for me for committee reports. A community policing advisory committee met as well this month, but I can't report from there. So I will do the same as Councillor Melnick, and she got me started. So just want to thank the residents of Division 1 for the honor of serving them the past 8 years. My time with the Federation of Canadian Municipalities definitely has been a highlight, as well as the many committees and colleagues that I've gotten to know. Likewise, I would just like to give huge accolades to Ms. Swain, our senior leadership team, as well as the staff at Parkland County. When I think back over the years of how we have streamlined, created efficiencies in very difficult times, where we were 8 years ago from where we are now with regard to the sophistication of our strategic plans. Everything that we do is something that I'm very, very proud of to leave and move on, still remaining in government. It's my passion. It's been for over 30 years. So I'm going to miss you all dearly. And I would just like to as well, especially acknowledge Councillor Capacitor for her mentorship for just that length of time.
Well, I don't have any committee reports, but like my two council colleagues that are not seeking re-election, this has been arguably the most rewarding opportunity I've had. It's been an honor and a privilege to serve with all of you. I want to thank Councillor Capacitor, Councillor Melnick, and Councillor Hollins, who provided me a lot of guidance and support, particularly in that first year. And I couldn't have done it without you, the councils that I served with, and the administration. We've accomplished some great things over the years. And, we often hear from residents, what do we get for our tax dollars? And perhaps we haven't shared some of the things that we've accomplished and what we do get, and some of the innovation that we brought forward. Parkland County and bringing forward the AHS building, keeping ambulance service in the region, and being the first municipality that entered into such an agreement with the province, where we own that building and lease it to the province for revenue generation. The work we've done, there's so many things, and I'm proud of the whole organization. I want to thank staff for their support, and most of all, just the friendships with the residents that I've established as well. We've got some great residents who've stepped up, who are serving on our public committees, and it certainly makes Parkland County a much better municipality to live in. So thanks to all. And with that, I'll take a motion to accept committee reports as information, please. Councillor Capacitor. That motion is on the floor. Please raise your hand if you're in favor. And Ms. Swain, did you have any closing comments?
Mayor Chagas, if I may, I just want to say one last thing before Ms. Swain. Whenever a resident says, what do I get for their tax dollars? I just remind them they get me.
Geez, I should have used that line as well. Ms. Swain, over to you.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'll keep it short because I'm not very good at this stuff, but I just want to take some time to say goodbye to our outgoing council members and acknowledge Councillor McQuaig, who left us in January. It's unfortunate that our last meeting today has to be virtual, but I am really grateful for the opportunity that I've had to work with all of you. And I just want to say that I really appreciate the trust and respect that you've provided us as administration. I feel that regardless of if you agree or not with the matter at hand, you've always treated us with respect, especially in these meetings. So I just want to say that I really appreciate it. It's clear that each and every one of you truly care about your community, and you put so much time and effort into your positions. And I'm sure this isn't the last that we'll see of the ones who are outgoing. So I'm looking forward to seeing what's next for all of you. And just remember the time limit at public input.
Thank you, Ms. Swain, for that. And we've already had discussion, Councillor Jensen, Councillor Melnick, and I, to set up a ratepayers group. So we'll be in that public input. Of course, we haven't, but I do want to take an opportunity also to thank all the individuals who put their names forth and are running and seeking a position on council. I want to wish the best of luck to Councillor McNabb, Councillor Capacitor, and Councillor Hollins as you seek re-election, and to those who will be successful. And I know our administration will have great orientation and will bring new council members up to speed, and we'll have a smooth transition, and the residents of Parkland County will be well served in the next term. So with that, we will adjourn this meeting at 11:59. Thank you, and God bless.